Welcome to the May 26, 2021 City Council meeting. We acknowledge we are on the traditional lands of the Treaty 4 territory, treaty signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta and Manitoba, and the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. To ensure social distancing measures are continuing to be met during this time, members of council are attending virtually, and most members of city administration as well. I'd like to remind those members attending to please ensure your video camera and microphone are off. If a member of council wishes to speak, enter your name in the chat window in order to be placed in the speaking queue. And when speaking, remember to unmute your microphone and enable your video camera. All votes will be conducted with a recorded vote. Delegations will be attending the meeting today through teleconferencing to address council on various items on the agenda. Can I have move a motion to approve the agenda at the call of the chair?
Hawkins, so moved.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Seconder?
Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Any opposed? Carried. The minutes were attached in the package. Can I have someone move a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the City Council meeting held on May 12th, 2021?
So moved, Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Any error or admissions? Hearing none. Any opposed? Oh, I apologize. I need a seconder.
Zakidniak.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Now I'll ask. Any opposed? Hearing none. Carried. First item of business is a tabled motion. So we will now consider item MN 21-5 from Councillor Bresciani to provide advance notice to the general public on council and committee agendas and procedural changes. Councillor Bresciani, can I ask you to introduce the motion?
Yes, thank you very much. So I will move to instruct the city solicitor to prepare amendments to the procedure bylaw, bylaw number 9004, to take effect June 9th, 2021, that require delegations wishing to address City Council to submit a written submission outlining the contents of their specific concerns and or comments and placed on the public meetings agenda. And two, to approve the amending bylaw at the June 9th, 2021 meeting of City Council following the approval of the recommendations by City Council, and to allow sufficient time for advertising the required public notice for the bylaw. So I'll need a seconder for that.
Shall. I'll second. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm doing here is I'm speaking to 1A, where we require the delegations to address in written form submission. As per our discussion with council previously, we discussed our procedurals, and looking at items 1B and 1C, those items will be brought back at a later time from the clerk. So those are very important, I believe very, very important, as we discussed as a council, but I know that the advance notice, which is again very important because we want to ensure we are engaging the public. I think we can all agree in that. And we want them to participate in the decision making, and so that means advance notice coming to council, and having an opportunity to speak on agenda items. As it stands right now, we know that the agendas come out on a Friday, and the public only has time. They have to provide by Monday at noon in a form. So what I want to ensure that, and I'd like to hear from the clerk if that's to ensure that that will be coming back in the fall, and also to ensure that that consideration will be made at that time with, I know, other things that were discussed. If I can just hear from the clerk. Through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Councillor Bresciani, I can confirm with you and members of council that the report that I'm required to bring in late November, early December, respecting the following year's calendar, will include a number of options for you to consider with respect to other changes to the procedure bylaw, including the one that you have cited here respecting the advanced distribution of agenda items. So yes, those and a lot of other ones will be covered and addressed and presented to you for approval and confirmation, or anything else that the council wishes to move forward at that time.
Thank you. So with that, Madam Mayor, I guess I will just speak then to the portion of the written and the importance of that, so council can just, I think, understand that when it's in written form, and we did this previously, and I would agree that this was a trial to see if we take it away, do we see more people come, or is there any benefit in that? I think that what I learned is that when one does not submit in a written form as a councillor, I would say also as the general public as well, you have to go back to listen to the video. There's nothing on record, so it's not in written form to go back to cite what the delegation was saying. So for one number reason, it does become part of the public record, which I think is vitally important. And I also think it's good governance. It does improve transparency in that way. But I also think the third point is it also provides an opportunity for the clerk because many people are new at this, they come forward with a submission. There is it's not a template, but some kind of a form that does guide individuals. And so it can take away, if there is any comments that may not be in there, may be deemed to a councillor or some point of the general public, that it's very respectful and on point. And but again, I think that any of these submissions can still come, I think, in a written form if it's point form, but still ensuring that there is some kind of a dialogue that, for me as a councillor, even for the media or for the general public in general, to be able to view these prior to. The last point I'd like to make is we did talk about accessibility and the importance of this, and that's why we maybe looked at that. But I think we also have to remember that we do have individuals who are hard of hearing or are deaf, that when we only have submissions, when we take away the written submissions, that leaves them at a loss because there's nothing there to read. And if you can't hear, that again becomes I think a way that it's not inclusive. It kind of goes back. So with the previous format, we had them write something and then they come and speak. So we are kind of meeting all of the pieces there. So I will leave it there for discussion. But again, I think that it's just another way for good governance, and I hope it's supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Stadnichuk, you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Do you, Mayor Masters, the one question I have is that the deadline, the time frame in this motion is June 1st. We had originally considered discussing this the past council meeting, but it was tabled. So my question, I guess, to either the clerk or Councillor Bresciani is whether or not the June 1st date works for us, in particular 1B, where there would be agenda items and reports available to Friday's preceding council or committee meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Stadnichuk. I'll have the city clerk answer.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify a couple of things, Councillor Stadnichuk, the motion that Councillor Bresciani has moved is essentially 1A and 1C. 1B has been, she did not move 1B, and the date of effect is June 9th. So what that means is for any meetings following the approval on June 9th will require written delegations. So that's, we will be expediting this to have this take effect for June 9th pending council approval.
Okay, sorry, somehow I missed that. Thank you so much for that clarification. I do support the idea of 1B, but that will be coming later, because I do think that we do need to give the public a lot more notice about what items are going to be discussed. And that's I guess that's all I will have to say. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Lori, for Councillor Bershani for bringing this forward. In my time when we voted on this, I know that we based a lot of it around accessibility into and being accessible to City Council. The reason I was opposed to this was not because we don't want to be accessible, but because I myself, especially being a new councillor, I need to be prepared for questions that delegates are going to answer, and I don't feel that answering them on the floor or asking them on the floor gave them and myself enough time to be educated on topics that were coming forward. Now, my one question is, when we go back to written delegates, if this does get passed, what would be the timeline for that delegate to have the written submission in by, since the council meetings start on the Wednesday? Through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. City Clerk?
At this point in time, Councillor Shaw, while the COVID pandemic restrictions remain and delegations are appearing virtually, my sense is that we would be retaining the Monday deadline before meetings. But it would be my position that would be reflected in the report later this year that if we should go back to distributing these with the final confirmation of the agenda on the Fridays, so that people would have essentially 5 days to read or briefly have a look at what delegations were saying. But at this point in time, I think we just have to we have to let people have the continued flexibility with registering online, and I think that we would just want to keep that so to avoid any kind of confusion over the next couple of months.
Okay, so that was kind of where I was going with this, was to have it by the Friday, but you're saying let's just leave it status quo and have the written submissions by Monday, but then when we bring this back in the fall, then we possibly could change it to the Friday. Is that the clarification through you, Madam Mayor?
Yes, through you, Mayor Masters.
Okay.
That's what I would suggest, Councillor Shaw, just to alleviate any confusion that the public might arise in the public from this.
Okay, and that's fine as long as it's something, because I do believe that we need more than just from Monday to Wednesday to go through all the delegates' things. But if that's being looked at in the future, then I'm fine with that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor LeBlanc.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask the clerk to consider an undertaking that his late November report on our procedure bylaw consider 3 elements. The first of those elements is clarification on what in the existing bylaw authorizes administration as opposed to council to deem that some matters be discussed in private rather than public. The second of the 3 is kind of a reflection on how we're doing vis-a-vis transparency, as indicated by the number of matters discussed in private as opposed to public. And the third would be an exploration and recommendation on the feasibility of amending the procedure bylaw such that only council can direct that matters be discussed in private rather than public. So that would be my request for an undertaking from the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. I think given the amount of work within that undertaking, that would be a direction from council to administration, and probably is better served for administration within a notice of motion or an amendment to the existing recommendation before us. Instructing administration to do that level of work should probably come at the behest of all of council and not an individual councillor. So if you'd like to put that in as an amendment, we can vote on that amendment.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to challenge that ruling that that's not an appropriate undertaking and ask that that be put to vote.
Thank you. So there's a challenge on the floor to my ruling. that this should be come by way of a amendment or a motion. So the clerk will have a vote on the challenge. And clerk, if you want to explain a little bit of that since we haven't done this.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So just for the benefit of all members and those watching, Councillor LeBlanc has challenged the ruling of the chair. And so typically what should happen now is, Councillor LeBlanc, if you have anything to add as to why you think the mayor's ruling is out of order, and then we would proceed to a vote. But you don't have to comment any further, but you do have that opportunity.
Thank you. So I'd make two primary points. One is, as I understand it, the clerk has discretion in whether to accept or reject the proposed undertaking. So I think it would be open for him or his office to say, that's too much work, we can't do it. As I understand the ruling, it's not put that question to him. So I think we ought to at least get there. The second I would raise on the point of presumed workload is two things, I think. One is the first request is simply asking what in our current bylaws authorize this. I don't think that is a large request. And the second of those is, how are we doing in terms of public versus private and transparency? Also, I don't think that's major. We've received an email privately from Mr. Holden outlining some of that data. I grant that the third one of the feasibility of switching that might be a bit larger. So my second point in relation to this is, I think it would be totally open for Mr. Nickel to say, I can do the first two of those, but not the third, and so on. So my suggestion is that that go to him, and if he says that's too large, I think we can have a second discussion at that point. Thank you.
So the vote before council is on the challenge to the ruling relative to this. So, Mr. Clerk, could you please explain to council one more time?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So what Councillor LeBlanc is challenging the mayor's ruling that this requires a motion of council as opposed to an undertaking. So for those members who believe or concur with Councillor LeBlanc's position, you should be voting yes, which would approve the challenge to the chair. If you disagree with Councillor LeBlanc, you would vote no, and the no signifies that you disagree with his motion and you accept the ruling of Mayor Masters. You have Councillor Mancinelli.
Sorry, Councillor Mancinelli, you want to ask a question?
No, he's just asked a clarifying question.
So being that this is a pandemic time in COVID and meetings over a computer on a screen, I know in-person meetings of the many I've attended, oftentimes when these matters arise, I witness a small conversation go forth as to what's on the floor and people are somewhat aware. I feel like I'm in a sheltered position here, not knowing if that's gone on or not. I know oftentimes there are comments from the clerk during the meeting for what's moving on task and what isn't. I was wondering if that occurred.
Through you, Mayor Masters, no. I wasn't aware that this undertaking request would be done. I do, if with the mayor's indulgence, I can attempt to answer Councillor LeBlanc's first 2 points. We have explained to council on previous occasions as well as publicly how things are done privately versus public agendas, and those are under the authorities of the Cities Act as well as the Local Authority and Freedom of Information Act. So points 1 and 2 are really neither here nor there. It's the third point of the exploration of the feasibility. To change anything in the procedure bylaw requires public notice, and we've also explained that the existing authority under which I place the agenda or put the agenda forward in consultation with the city manager is in the procedure bylaw. Because the procedure bylaw requires a public notice advertisement as required by law, that is, in my view, why you need a motion. to undertake the feasibility, because that's the only way you can change it. And so I believe that is the most open and transparent way of doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Mancelli, clarified?
Perfectly satisfied, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zakidniak, you have a clarifying question as well?
I do, yeah, thank you. So if we vote no, we are saying that we agree that we need an amendment rather than an undertaking.
That's right.
Is that accurate?
That is correct.
That is all. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
With respect to Councillor LeBlanc's challenge, I will begin with Councillor LeBlanc, please.
Yes.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
Yes.
Councillor Hawkins.
No.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Bresciani.
Opposed?
Councillor Findura.
No.
Councillor Shaw.
No.
Councillor Zahidniak.
No.
Councillor Mancinelli.
No.
Councillor Mole.
No.
Mayor Masters.
No.
The challenge is lost 8-3, Mayor. Councillor LeBlanc retains the ability to now move a motion should he wish to.
Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc, would you like to move a motion? An amendment to MN 21-5?
No, I wouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions relative to Councillor Bresciani's motion before you, which is 1A and C at present? Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. So I just want some clarity in relation to 1A. So it mentions that there will be the need for a written submission outlining the contents of their specific concerns. Is there going to be further direction provided aside from that? I ask because I guess my other question is that a change from the previous directions on how to provide a written submission? So those two questions to start.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Mr. Clerk?
Question, Councillor Zahidniak. In previous years, it was stipulated that written submissions had to be, submitted in writing, and that delegations read them into the record word for word. 2 or 3 years ago, that was changed to be relaxed, that a written submission was still required, but that the author could submit something in point form or a couple of paragraphs, did not have to submit everything that he or she might be saying within their 5 minutes, but was to give a general overview or indication of where they were going to speak. When the change was made last year, everything was removed. People had the option to send in something in writing, but they didn't have to. So my understanding and my interpretation of this would be that we would return to a written submission with the delegation having the option to provide it in full or in an abbreviated form, highlighting the main areas in which they wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. So my next question is, I had brought this up in the past in relation to this concern. My understanding is that if necessary, the clerk's office is available to provide folks with supports, whatever assistance they may need to prepare their written submission. So my request is, if this change occurs, if that we can ensure that message is made clear that we are here to help you if you need with your written submission.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Zahidniak, my office remains available to assist people. However, people need to understand that we will not write them for them. We're not changing their spelling or their grammar. We will help people. If somebody writes in handwriting and we think it's largely you can't read it, we will often type it up to put on the public record. so to make sure that everyone can read it and understand it fully. We have also on occasion helped people who might have a hearing disability or can't write on their own. We have helped them. But again, those are done in exceptional circumstances and they'll continue to be done. But I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that we are an editing group and a copyright group and we're going to help them write that. Because first of all, we don't have time and it's not appropriate for my office to be editing and putting potentially words in someone's mouth that they haven't put themselves.
Okay, thank you. Do we currently have any messaging on the website or anywhere saying that, you know, if you have questions or barriers to providing a written submission, contact the clerk's office and we can help you with that process?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. The website offers that information to say if you have any questions or need assistance, please contact the clerk's office, and we can be reached either by phone or by clerks@regina.ca.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Councillor Zagidniak. Any other member of council who wish to speak to the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll begin with Councillor Bresciani, please.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Opposed.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Mole.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
Opposed.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Carries 9-2, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We now move on to public hearing and public notice bylaws. We'll consider the bylaws that require a public hearing, and I will turn it over to Deputy Mayor Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have bylaw 2021-37, 38, 39, and 40. I move, seconded by Councillor Zakidniak, that bylaws 37, 38, 39, and 40 be introduced and read a first time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Stevens. Mr. Clerk, please comment.
Thank you, Mayor. As required in terms of bylaws requiring a public hearing, as Councillor Stevens has mentioned, 4 bylaws are before Council today. In view of the pandemic, interested parties were apprised of this hearing to take place today, but no delegations were submitted. Accordingly, bylaw 2021-37, to provide rezoning to accommodate development of single-family dwellings on Buckingham Drive. 2021-38, to provide rezoning to accommodate low and medium-density residential development on 3300 Anaquod Road and to allow for front and lane vehicle access. 2021-39, to consolidate and make amendments to the city's policy applicable to the calculation and imposition of development fees, levies, and servicing fee charges. And 2021-40, to amend the official community plan bylaw to expand the city center boundary to include the lands commonly referred to as the Regina Exhibition Grounds.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Any opposed? Hearing none, carried. Councillor Stevens, can you please do the second reading of the bylaw?
Yes, thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Shaw, that bylaws 2021-37, 38, 39, and 40 be read a second time.
Do any members of council have any questions? Seeing none, any opposed? Carried. Deputy Mayor Stevens, please do the third reading.
I move, seconded by Councillor Mancinelli, that Council hereby consents to bylaws 2021-37, 38, 39, and 40 going to a third reading at this meeting.
Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Please go ahead.
I move, seconded by Councillor Moll, that bylaws 2021-37, 38, 39, and 48 be read a third time.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Stevens. We will be moving on to CR 21-90. However, we do have some delegations relative to this. I would, one moment, please. All right, I would like to call upon Delegation Kathleen Donovan. Please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you're representing. You'll have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any question that members of Council may have for you. And may I please add, can you please state where it is you live in terms of geographically the city you live in? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Donovan, and I'm a resident of the Cathedral area of Regina. I'm speaking on behalf of the Cathedral Area Community Association on Regina's toxic water crisis. For the sake of expediency, I'm beginning with a summary of our 9 recommendations. Please read our submission for details. Number 1, reject the 15-year timeline and reinstate the original promise of 5 years. Do not limit funding to utility budget and utilize the mill rate, provincial transfers, and other income sources and or loans. Contribute to the cost of home line replacement, as in Saskatoon's example, with full cost assistance for low-income homeowners. 4, conduct voluntary blood testing program with SHA for children in high-risk areas. 5, install free under-sink reverse osmosis filter units for all identified affected residents as a temporary measure until line replacement. 6, significantly clarify communication in a way that does not minimize the consequences of drinking lead-laced water and explain the meaning of test result figures in Canada's as well as Canada's drinking guidelines. 7, do not delay lead line replacement using roads being newly paved as a reason. If a road was paved without replacement of old lead lines, residents should not have to bear lead exposure as a consequence. 8, require landlords to participate in mandatory water testing and install reverse osmosis filtration until lead water connections are replaced, similar to requirements for installing fire alarms. 9, involve community associations in the development and delivery of a 5-year plan. Those are the ends of the summarized recommendations. We ask councillors to reflect on the fact that Regina has among the highest lead levels in Canada. According to Health Canada, there is no known safe exposure level to lead, and lead is classified as probably carcinogenic to humans. And it causes harm to brain, kidneys, and reproduction, and especially it's has harmful impacts on children's developing brains. According to the city's own data of 168 homes known to have lead lines that were tested between 2016 and 18, 57% were above the federal limit in the first liter out of the tap in the morning. On the 6th tap draw, roughly equivalent to 1 minute line flush, the average concentration of lead was 23.3 parts per billion, far exceeding the Health Canada guideline of no more than 5 ppb or 0.005 milligrams per liter lead. Individual homes can be much higher. My own home, for example, tested at 0.111 milligrams per liter, which is the equivalent of 111 parts per billion. This is 22 times the maximum allowable unit limit. It is greater than a 104 ppb result that first raised the alarm during Flint, Michigan's water crisis. After much difficulty navigating the system, I managed to get a filter, but others did not and are likely still drinking the contaminated water. It is unreasonable to expect residents to wait 10 to 15 years to be protected from a toxic substance in their drinking water. 15 years means babies born today may be exposed to lead contamination for their entire childhood. The United Nations recognizes access to safe drinking water as a fundamental human right, and the Canadian Constitution guarantees a right to essential services of reasonable quality. We have provided an expert legal opinion that states that when it comes to safe drinking water, the Constitution is not merely aspirational. but rather embodies a substantial obligation. In this light, safe water is not just another demand to be balanced with competing interests such as sports stadiums, police budgets, or low property taxes. Yet councilors opted for another razor-thin mill rate increase this year, proudly described in the press as the lowest since 2009. Consequently, lead line replacement funding rests solely with non-progressive utility rate increases rather than progressive taxation through the mill rate. The result leaves inner-city residents exposed to lead contamination for years to come. There are many problems with the filter program. While we appreciate it, it was expanded by the city budget. Our report includes testimony from residents that throws into question the adequacy of the program. Uptake is very low because of barriers to access testing and the filter program, which leaves only the most motivated individuals protected. Further, only the wealthiest can afford the more effective under-sink reverse osmosis option, which costs up to $1,000 or more. In legal risks, our report provides examples of people turning to the courts across the country to obtain their rights to safe drinking water and reasonable essential services. This deserves careful consideration. Taking action. The city of Saskatoon has been more proactive, averaging 483 replacements per year, and will complete the work by 2026. They cover 60% of the homeowners with the replacement and assist property owners with the remaining 40%. Regina's plan is to have the homeowners pay all the costs of private lines with payment plans of up to 10 years for some residents. Several Cathedral homeowners have already paid from $3,500 to $7,200 for a replacement, which is simply unobtainable for many of our residents compared to programs that spread costs more evenly. Safe drinking water cannot be set aside. We expect our politicians to uphold basic human rights and defend vulnerable citizens no matter what. That's what I had presented, summarized from the report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Donovan. Appreciate your presentation. Members of council, do you have questions of the delegate? Councillor Stadnicek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Mayor Masters, question to Ms. Donovan. Can you say a little bit more about when you realized that you had lead service connection at your household, and what was involved in terms of testing your water levels and how you communicated with the city in terms of getting a filter through the mayor?
Okay. Well, I didn't really realize what my lead levels meant because there's no communication anywhere about that. I thought it was just high, and so I went and got a filter. The first one was given was a plus one. It broke. I got another one, and then it broke. And then I got the jug with the and got the $100 rebate. I wasn't aware there was a continued $100 rebate every year. I didn't have that information. So it was very difficult to navigate the system, which I've mentioned, and I don't think a lot of people can or do, and I think that's part of the reason there's only been an 80% recorded uptake. I'm shocked now. I didn't know what it meant. The numbers, the 6 or 7 numbers that were on a sheet of paper that were provided to me as a result of my testing. And now, just because of being involved as a volunteer with the community association, I realize now that my water levels are 20 times higher than the one that Health Canada considers to be a safe level. 22 times higher. I'm very upset now because I didn't know that. I just thought I put a filter on. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. I use it for drinking water for sure, but I had no idea that I could be exposed to this. And it's since 2019 is when I got the notification. So I'm very upset about the communication online in terms of the website, which is extremely hard to even find in terms of what they can do for you with the water testing and the filtering and all that, but also in terms of the results and what it means. That the seriousness of the consequences are not are not reviewed anywhere. I had no idea what those numbers meant until I got involved with this particular issue in the last couple weeks.
Through you, Madam Mayor, second question. So through the community association, has the community association reached out to residents, or they've heard directly from residents about their concerns with lead? Are you aware of that?
Am I aware that they have reached out to residents?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious if they're aware of, if they've actually reached out to talk to residents about the issue, or if residents are just contacting them about the issue through the mayor.
I think a lot of people are contacting people who know board members, and that's where the information is coming from. In my own situation, I'm talking to a lot of my neighbors, and on my block there's not a very low uptake on the filter system, and I know that a lot of it is hearsay and relating from others, you know, what's going on around here. But I'm not aware of anything else that's going on, although it could be, because I'm just newly involved with the association.
Okay. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Any further questions from council? Seeing none, I'll thank you again for your presentation this afternoon, Ms. Donovan, and ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to call upon Delegation Steve Wolfson. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any, and the place in which you reside. You'll have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any question that the members of Council may have for you. Good afternoon, Mr. Wilson.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to present. My name's Steve Wolfson. I live in the Cathedral area, and I'm representing myself and my family as a resident of the area. I became aware of the unhealthy levels of lead in some Regina water when our residence was tested back in 2017 and showed higher than acceptable levels of lead. I was particularly concerned because we're raising our twin granddaughters who were 6 years old at the time. We immediately began filtering our water and got in touch with the city about replacement of the city's lead service. There was no lead service on our side. In 2019, the city replaced our lead service, and this was greatly appreciated and relieved the concerns about the impact of lead on our children and us. It felt great, so thanks for that. I remain concerned about other people in Regina who are continuing to receive water with elevated levels of lead. I was pleased to learn that the city was taking this issue very seriously and had agreed to implement a 5-year program to replace all lead services in Regina. Now I understand that the program is being amended to take 15 years to complete. This significantly increases the time period, and it's very disappointing. I understand the cost and coordination aspects that make a 15-year program more appealing to the city. However, I do not feel that a 15-year program is in the best interest of the health of people receiving water with elevated lead levels, especially children. Over 15 years, 2 additional generations of children will receive unhealthy levels of lead in their drinking water. I would like City Council to consider a shorter period of time for replacing all of the city's lead services and replacing the owner-side lead services. I think that program is also important. I'm glad to see that that's part of your plan. An effective stopgap water filter program, I feel, is essential with a 5-year replacement program, but much more so with a 15-year replacement program. I saw the stats showing that the uptake for resident water testing and requests for city-supplied water filters is considered quite low. I also note that the highest proportion of homes with lead service connections are in Cathedral, Heritage, Old Lakeview, North Central, and Al Ritchie neighborhoods. These are also the home to many low-income families. There are numerous reasons why low-income families are less likely to be aware or take advantage of the testing and filter programs. for a 5 or 10 or 15-year lead service replacement program. The stopgap filter program is extremely important. I feel the City Council should implement as soon as possible an improved testing and home filter program that will assure all residents with lead connections are fully aware of the testing and filter programs. I believe the best way to achieve this is by going door to door with information and filters which can be provided to the residents at the time and possibly installed at the time. Perhaps this could be a program staffed by university students over the summer. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the City Council for taking seriously the dangers in lead in the city's water. I'm in favor of reducing the time to complete the program from the proposed 15 years. Whichever time span City Council chooses, I strongly urge City Council to create a program that will ensure that all residents, especially low-income families with lead services, are supplied with an appropriate filter and filter replacements. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolfson. Members of council, do any of you have a question for the delegate? Councillor Skadnicek.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Thank you, Mr. Wolfson, for coming forward. So you, your lead water line was replaced in 2019. Did you have any testing before that in terms of the levels of lead that you had in your water prior to that service line being replaced?
Yes, I guess it was in 2017 when it was first tested, and it showed levels that were above what were considered safe, although as I'm aware that there are actually no safe levels of lead or other heavy metals for children particularly. But yeah, we had it tested in 2017, and then we had it tested again after the service was replaced, just to be ourselves comfortable. So the city did another test and showed that in fact now the levels of lead are quite low and below the levels that are of concern.
Thank you. Did you take the initiative through the mayor? Did you take the initiative to get your water tested? Is that sort of the way it happened? Or I'm not sure exactly what was happening, if the city was testing water or...
Well, you know, we got a letter and it said this is a random, you've been selected for a random test of your water, which seemed awful strange. But anyway, so I thought, okay, yeah. So we had it tested, and I really, you know, I have a public health degree, and I was actually stunned that we had high levels of lead. I just didn't think that was happening in China. So yeah, it was originally just a random letter. I mean, it wasn't like we want to test your water. It was like, well, you know, this is a random thing, you can volunteer or not. But we were happy to volunteer, and then we did find out there was a problem.
Okay, thank you for that. Your neighbors, through the mayor, your line was replaced, but were your neighbor's line replaced at the same time, or you are not aware of?
No, it wasn't. It's just it was our individual home. They dug up the line and replaced it. It's a big job. I understand. I was surprised how long and how difficult it was. But anyway, they were here for several days and replaced the line just for our house because they just did that singly. It wasn't part of a road replacement. And I do know that I've talked to various neighbors, and some are concerned, and some are, you know, one neighbor that I talked to has a number of small children, and they're still talking about, well, should they or shouldn't they get a filter? And I'm like, geez, get a filter. Anyway, you know, so I just feel like there's a lot of kids that are being exposed unnecessarily. So educationally, but I just think a lot of people won't get it unless you really knock on their door and say, you know, there's lead in your water. We're pretty darn sure we want to test it, and we want you to use a filter until we can replace that pipe.
Thank you. So through Mayor Masters, and I guess my last question, you mentioned you have a public health degree. So the previous speaker talked about all of the health risks associated with lead in water. I understand that also that lead can accumulate in the body. Do you have any information? I don't know if you do, but I'm just asking if you understand, like, it's not just that there's lead in the water that you consume once, but that it accumulates in the body?
That's the real issue with heavy metals, yes. I'm also a former dentist, and so I'm aware of mercury because that is similar. So lead is another heavy metal, and so it does cause neurological problems and can cause the developmental problems and other things. But once it's consumed, it really does stay in the body, and it's not cleared out like other kinds of medications, other things we might take. So it does accumulate over time.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Councillor Shaw.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for that presentation. Now, I have kind of a dumb question, and please excuse my ignorance. Through you, Madam Mayor, if people just put the filters onto their water system in the house, how much lower does that bring the lead down, or does it bring it down to a drinking level? So it's kind of, do you understand what I'm kind of asking, through you, Madam Mayor?
Well, the water, I haven't actually done the test, so I don't know, but the water filters are rated to take out a significant portion of the lead so that, in fact, it should be safe drinking levels. Now, not all filters do that, so you have to make sure that you get the correct filter, and as I understand, the city is giving out filters that will effectively remove that. The real issue becomes, so you've got how many different water taps in your home, and will you, I know our kids tend to run up when we're on the second floor, and they'll fill their water bottle from the tap in the bathroom, which might not have a filter, right? So they're then, at risk. Now, not in our house anymore, but that was how it was. So, do you get just one filter for one tap? Do you use it for all your cooking, which you definitely should? Anything that you're boiling or any water that you're cooking with, you should use the filtered water. So you can go through a fair amount of water, and the filters have to be changed. They become ineffective. So they're okay, and they're a good stopgap measure, but they're not something that you should depend on for the long term. The best thing is replacing the pipe, but in the short term, it will certainly reduce any significant concern about harm to kids and adults.
Okay. I'd just like to thank you for coming up with a solution to have the university students go around and put them out. I think that's a great idea. But thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Council, any other questions for the delegate? Seeing none, I'll thank you again, Mr. Wolfson, for your presentation this afternoon, and ask that you now please leave the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Masters. All right.
Thank you, sir. We will now consider item CR 21-90, Lead Service Connection Management Program Report. Councillor Hawkins, I'm going to ask that you introduce the report, but just prior to that, I just want to give notice to Council that George Koutsalis, let's hope I got that right, from the Saskatchewan Health Authority is on the line with us today and available to answer questions as part of the administration. Thank you. Councillor Hawkins, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The issue here is, I don't think there's any issue on whether or not lead is dangerous in the water. I think it's generally agreed that there's no amount of lead that's safe in the water. The issue here is the best way for Regina to deal with the problem of lead pipes, and specifically the time period over which piping on the city side can be replaced and whether or not the program that's proposed on the private side is adequate. Madam Mayor, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the administration to explain why it is that they're proposing the 15-year time period, and in particular, I'd like them to address the question of cost, coordination, and technical matters that have come up in the delegation's presentation. I'm grateful that the guest is here as an expert as well, and the administration may wish to refer appropriate comments to them as well. So to the administration, those questions, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Mr. Onright?
Thank you. Through the mayor. So the recommended 15-year replacement, the reason administration has brought that forward is as we looked at this entire program, taking into consideration costs, construction program, and being able to find a balance between the two, when you lessen the years to get the work done, the impact in the community is far greater. So as we only have about a five-year or 5-month period of time that we do construction projects, we would be fitting this work into that time period, which will impact the community from traffic flow, just general impact in the community. The other consideration is on the cost side. If you look at the 15-year program, administration's recommendation is a one-time 2% increase in the 2022 budget. If you go to a 10-year program, you have 2% over 2 years. And if you go to the 5-year program, just bear with me. If you go to the 5-year program, it would be 3% over 2 years. And the long-term water utility, or the long-term utility forecast, which takes into consideration all of the operating expenses and capital expenses, there will be a recommendation, as noted in the report, coming forward for asking for a 3-year program for tax increases of 3% in each one of the 3 years, 22, 23, and 24. I'm going to ask Mr. Doney to add further comment to the opening.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So as Mr. Onright has mentioned, there's a balance that administration is trying to find between the affordability of the utility rate increase and the increased construction and disruption to residents. It's also important to know that residents have the ability to reduce lead at their tap now with the filter program and with the request for the city to replace the public side lead service connection if the private side has been replaced. So by finding that balance, that's how we've landed on the 15-year recommendation to balance the affordability with the disruption that would be expected from this amount of construction work.
I believe administration is done. Councillor Hawkins, do you have anything more to add?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to nail this down a bit. As I understand it, the administration is anticipating a 3% price rise in the utility for each of the next 3 years, leaving aside the lead connection issue. However, and this is where I want to be clear, if we go to a 15-year, if we stay with a 15-year recommendation, it'll be 3% plus 2% in the first year, then 3% in the second year, and then 3% in the third year. Is that correct through the administration? So 5, 3, and 3.
Through you, Mayor Masters, that is correct.
All right, and for clarity, if we go to a 10-year program rather than a 15-year program, it's 5% in the first year, again 5% in the second year, and then 3% in the third year. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Masters, that is correct.
And then finally, Mayor Masters, if we go to a 5-year program, as has been suggested, it would be a 5% increase in the water utility rate in the first year, a further 5% increase in the water utility rate in the second year, 6% in the first year, 6% in the second year, and then back to 3% in the third year. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor
For the
Masters. Just to clarify, it would be 6% in 2022, 6% in 2023, 1% or 4% overall in 2024, and 4%, 1% dedicated to this program, 3% on the proposed, 1% in 2025, because that rate would not be set, it would be over the 3 years.
Thank you very much. Mayor Masters, a couple of other questions. The filter program, it's got a take-up rate of 20%. We've heard that it's ineffective in terms of, or difficult in terms of the navigating the Facebook information. Can you explain to me exactly how the filter program works? And first of all, what you get, and secondly, how you get it?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll ask Mr. Doney to just talk about the detail of that program.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So residents can access the filter program by calling City of Regina. So when they call up Regina, they talk to staff, and they can determine if they live in a certain area that would have lead service connections. And if they do, then they have the option of getting a water pitcher filter, a tap-mounted filter, or if those don't work for residents, a rebate. And if residents choose one of those two filters, the city will hand deliver them to residents' home so that they have those filters available for use immediately.
Is that filter offer renewable year after year until the lead pipe problem is fixed?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So yes, as City Council approved in March of 2021, an annual lead filter program, that filter is available on an annual basis.
Through you, Madam Mayor, does the city have information that that filter program is effective in terms of removing lead from water?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the filters that we provide are NSF certified, which means that they are certified to remove lead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. If we go to a 5-year program, can you explain what that means for the summer construction season, particularly in wards 1, 2, and 3, where there's a higher instance of lead pipe?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So what you will see in those areas which also have a number or a higher number of poor roads in those areas. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things. The impact in that area, and then the impact overall in the city on the road network in other areas in the city. So where a high majority of our work occurs today through the residential road renewal program, that occurs in the areas Councillor Hawkins has mentioned. When you go to a 5-year program, the impact in those areas becomes much greater. On the other side of this, when you look at the overall impact in the city, you end up, as you shorten the program or increase the lead service connection work, you end up impacting some of the good roads prematurely. So what happens is you end up going in, doing work in those areas where those roads normally would be extended out before they would need to be renewed or reconstructed. So the timing gets out of sequence, which becomes very costly in that part of the program. So the 15 years is striking a balance, and the timing and coordination is much better at 15 years to do work on the poor roads. As the good roads turn into poor roads, you would be doing that work through that 15-year period, and you wouldn't necessarily be doing it prematurely. So the effectiveness of the money that you have is much greater at 15 years. As you move down into 10 and 5, the coordination of that part of the work is not necessarily in sequence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. If we went to a 5-year program, are there adequate numbers of construction workers and skilled workers to do this work within 5 years?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the majority of this work, or all of this work, would be contracted out. That would be, pardon me, that would be dependent on whether or not the market could handle the amount of work in that short period of time.
And do you have any opinion on whether it could or could not?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll ask Mr. Doney if he has anything to offer in terms of that.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So we've looked at the amount of work, obviously, that would be required over 5 years. And just to give some context, that we estimate that would be 20 to 30 blocks of construction in the areas that have lead service connections. So it would have a significant impact. Whether or not there's construction capacity to do that, I think the first couple of years there would be limited construction capacity, but contractors would likely scale up to try to address the need.
Thank you. And a final question for the administration through you, Madam Mayor. What's the situation in Saskatoon and how does it compare to Regina?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll ask Mr. Doney to comment.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So we based the program support options that are in front of council primarily on Saskatoon's program. So the support programs are very similar. What is very different is that the City of Saskatoon is changing their lead service connections at the same time that they're changing their small diameter cast iron water mains. So it's an integrated project. The City of Regina changed out our small diameter cast iron water mains in the 1980s and early 1990s. And so that work has been done. And unfortunately at that time, lead service connections were not replaced. So that's one of the fundamental differences between the City of Saskatoon's program and the City of Regina's program.
And through you, Madam Mayor, does that explain, I gather the Saskatoon timeline is shorter. Does that explain, your explanation just explain why Saskatoon has a shorter timeline?
Through you, Mayor Masters, yes, that's generally why the City of Saskatoon is able to do many more lead service connections, because it is integrated as part of their cast iron removal program.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, I'm going to keep my comments very brief. This is, as has been mentioned, a question of balance. In a perfect world, I suppose we'd change all our lead filters immediately, but it's not a perfect world. I think we do have to consider cost here. One of the things that residents in Regina speak to me most frequently about come budget time is the cost of water in Regina, which is already high, owing to our distance from the source. I think we have to have some consideration for what the taxpayer can handle here. There's also, as has been mentioned, coordination issues with respect to replacing new roads, with respect to coordinating private lines with the city lines. All of that suggests to me that we have to look for balance, and I'm interested to hear what others have to say. But I think the administration has carefully considered the balance. However, the clincher for me is that there is a viable option on the table, and that is water filters. And we probably need to do a better job publicizing the program. We probably need to do a much better job getting the filters to people who need them. But that viable option does suggest to me that we consider cost and coordination in deciding what the time limit is. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hawkins, for asking a bunch of my questions and clarifying for me some of that math. I appreciate it. Council, the floor is open for questions, comments. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins, for clarifying a lot of my questions, and that was one of my concerns, is the cost versus the impact. We do have a viable source, as we heard today, that the filters that we are given out do filter out the lead. This is something that's working. Me as a councillor, I understand that some people just, they haven't made it an importance to them to call the city and to do that. So as myself, I feel that that's on them. There's nothing I can't force a person, I can't force a cow to water and make them drink. But I am offering that I will go house to house and help with some of these if that need be, to help out councillors that live in this area, if that's something that they'd be offered to. I believe that administration has done their due diligence and really showed that the cost and the capacity between the 5 to 10 and 15 years. So with that, that's kind of all I have to say, and thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. A couple of questions through the Mayor to City Administration. In terms of construction or the replacement of lead service lines, can any of that be done during the winter?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll ask Mr. Doney to comment.
Through you, Mayor Masters. Some of the work can be done through the winter. Unfortunately, the restoration cannot. So the cuts in the road and the sidewalk would remain unrestored until summertime comes to allow that to be restored.
Okay, thank you. Further, further with the funding, I guess through the mayor, I have some questions about the funding. We did hear delegation. The main concern seems to be, well, it's the coordination with work, but then a concern with cost. We've heard that. But we've also heard, like, from the community association, from the delegation, Cathedral Community Association, the delegation did speak about that using the utility fund is not a progressive way of funding this. Considering, I don't know if there's any other emergencies or issues that would happen where there was a health risk involved, where we would find the funding from somewhere else. So through the mayor, I'm just sort of wondering, I know I asked this question in committee, but I really would like to get a better understanding of can we try to fund this without going through the utility fund?
Through you, Mayor Masters, because this is utility related, the funding does come from the utility. I'm not sure, I think Mr. Holden was going to provide comment.
Okay.
So through you, Mayor Masters, if there was a need for council to make a decision, an expenditure that was related to a health situation, obviously it could be withdrawn from a reserve. I think in this case, because there is a mitigation measure, in terms of the lead filters and that program being available annually until the lines are replaced. I think administratively our opinion is that we are mitigating it, and therefore it's not as emergent as a situation that didn't have a mitigation opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Regarding the filter program, so some questions we heard from some delegates that it was, they felt that the filter program was inadequate. Now there's the amount 20% uptake. I actually, if we have 7,000 to 8,000 private lead service connections in Regina, that would be less than 10% if there's only about 400 people who are either getting a filter or getting a rebate for their filter that they've purchased. So I would say that's less than 10%. So I do find that very, very concerning. I had an email from a resident on Angus Street, 3000 block, Angus in Old Lakeview, where when she was pregnant with their child, they decided to buy water because the provincial health authority actually told them that that would be the safest option. So they've been purchasing water, and I'm sure there may be other people in the city who are doing that. So there are costs already. People are either paying out of pocket or there's costs to people's health. So I do think that we have to take this very seriously. And ensure that as many people as possible have, that our goal should be 100%. So I have an amendment that I'd like to make to the report. I sent it to Amber just moments before we started, and the amendment would direct city administration to develop a more robust water filter program to ensure that 100% of residents with a lead service connection would have a water filter provided to them, a certified water filter provided to them until such time as their lead service connection line is replaced. So there it is. Oops, it was up.
We see the emails, not the amendment.
Yeah, the amendment was up briefly and then...
Just one moment. Deputy Clerk's working through here.
Okay, there it is. And just a correction, that should be... Oh, no. Sorry. So I guess I need a seconder. So the amendment is that City Council directs City Administration to develop a robust water filter distribution plan with the goal that 100% of households in Regina with a lead service connection receive a city-provided water filter or filter rebate until such time that their lead service connection is replaced by the city.
Madam Mayor, this is an amendment to my motion, which gives me the option of accepting the amendment. If in light of that, Madam Mayor, through you, if you agree, I would like to ask the proposer of the amendment a couple of questions.
Certainly, Mr. Councillor Hawkins. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. When you say City Administration develop a robust water filter distribution plan with the goal that 100% of the households in Regina with lead service connection, I would ask, have the option of receiving a city-provided water filter. Would you accept to have the option of, and then a period at the end of the filter, leaving aside the question of rebate, which is not an issue that, the problem with the rebate is you never know how you're going to, a person receiving a rebate is going to spend the rebate. So if you just have the option of receiving a city-provided water filter and leave it at that, I could accept this as a friendly amendment.
Councillor Stephenchuk?
Well, through you, my only concern would be, without mentioning the rebate, that having the option of receiving a filter could imply that people could refuse a filter. And that's my only concern, is that I think anyone with a lead service connection should be protected. And if we're not replacing their line, that we, in the meantime, we need to provide this kind of protection. So that's my only concern.
My difficulty with that, Madam Mayor, is that I don't know, the city has no means, legal means, I think, of forcing people to take a filter. I just can't imagine there's any legal process that would enable a city to force someone to take a filter if they didn't want a filter.
Oh, all right, then I'll accept that.
So, Madam Mayor, with those two changes, with the option to receive a city-provided water filter and a period at the end of that, omitting the words following a period, I'd accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We have the benefit of not having a seconder yet either. Councillor Stadnichuk, did you want to second the motion as amended?
I am still a little bit concerned about the wording, I'm sorry. Just because I do think this needs to be in place until their lead service connection is replaced.
I'll second it, Andrew.
Thanks. Just one moment, please.
So, Madam Mayor, it should have the words, with the option of receiving a city-provided water filter.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Amber is just working on it right now, so she can get it up for everyone to
Thank
see.
you.
Actually, that wording with the option of receiving would be right after LSC in the parentheses.
Councillor Stadnichuk, is that reflective of what you're referring to?
Yes, except for there's no time frame. That's my only concern. But I'm not sure if we're supposed to debate, like if we're supposed to amend, but
Right now, it's part of the
Madam
original
Mayor.
motion as seconded by Councillor Stevens. We're just making sure that we can get it up there and all three of you can agree on the
all right.
language.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Onrait, did you want to speak?
I do. Through the mayor, if I can just have one moment.
Absolutely. Deputy Clerk is just sharing it so that those of us in the chambers can see it. Up till now, we haven't been able to see it.
So maybe just to provide a bit of clarification on the number of lead service connections in the city. There are approximately 3,600 connections on the private side. It is anticipated there are 7,000 to 8,000 in total. We know and can test the 3,600, but we don't know on the private side because these are in private homes, so we don't have the exact locations for the balance of these. So that's why we rely on the public to contact the city to do the testing and to provide the filter system. The other part of it is the contact between the resident and our staff is very important in either a phone call or face-to-face discussion to determine what is actually needed, and this varies a bit home to home. So just wanted to provide a bit more context to this.
Mr. Onrait, are you referring to the fact that 100% of households in Regina receiving a lead service connection with the option a city-provided water filter, is that requires face-to-face or point-of-person contact.
Yes, or over the phone. And when I'm looking at the amendment, we can deal with this on the 3600 side. It is quite difficult to deal with it on the balance up to the 7,000 or 8,000. So in essence, another 3,600 residents, unless they're reaching out to us and we can walk them through how to test their line inside the house, we don't know if there are lead service connections. We have a general idea in the area, but specific households, we don't always know that. So when I look at the, sorry, through you, Mayor Masters, when I look at the 100% of households in Regina, we need cooperation with the community to be able to get there. And our intention is, once we get direction from council, we will be reaching out to community associations, and we will be looking at our internal communication program. I know we've had some inquiries about an online application form, and we will review all of that once we have direction from council.
Thank you. Councillor Stadnichuk, is that reading as you would like it? This is a friendly amendment to Councillor Hawkins' motion, seconded by Councillor Stevens.
I don't see the amendment again, but it's the what was on the screen previously.
Okay,
correct?
you see it. Okay.
Yes. And again, the point of a goal of 100%, a goal is something to strive for and as best as we can. But if we have I think we need that goal.
Okay, so if you're comfortable with the friendly amendment as it's written, aside from your comments that you made just now, did you want to speak further to the motion?
I would like to see the, through you, Madam Mayor, I would like to see a shorter time frame. I've received a number of emails from residents, especially in Old Lakeview, who are very concerned about this and see it as a risk. As we heard from a number of the delegations, it's not everyone maybe has the ability to advocate for themselves, and so I think that we have to take whatever measures we can to ensure the safety of residents who have lead. We know that the testing in Regina has shown levels higher than Flint, Michigan, and some people are not even aware of what they have. So we do need a robust education program, communications program, and a robust filter program. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Councillor Shaw, you wish to speak to the recommendations?
Yes, if you don't mind, I just want some clarification. From what I understand, if somebody, so if I live in an area where I've learned that there might be lead in my water, all I have to do is phone the city of Regina, and they will offer me a picture or something that will attach to my tap, and they will bring it to my house and deliver it to me. And is that the way it is right now? Is that correct through you, Madam Mayor?
Through you, Mayor Masters, that is correct. Some residents will opt to go purchase their own and then file for the rebate from the city.
So what I'm not quite understanding is, like I had said when I spoke, I can't make somebody phone the city of Regina if they are suspicious that there's lead in the water. I mean, I can't make I can't make my neighbor put a filter on their system if they don't want a filter on their system. Am I understanding this correctly, that council wants this to be this way through you, Madam Mayor?
Through you, Mayor Masters. Councillor Shaw, can you repeat that, please?
What I'm trying to understand is we already have it in place right now that if I live in the area and I'm in the area where there's possible lead in my pipes, if I phone the city, you guys will deliver a filter, a rebate, or a pitcher, whatever I want. Now, what I'm trying to figure out is with this amendment, or how can we as city councilors and how can we as municipality make sure that everybody has a filter on their water if we suspect that there is lead in there, if they don't want it? That's what I'm trying to understand. Is this correct in this motion moving forward? Through you, Madam Mayor.
So, Councillor Shaw, maybe ask that you direct the question to Councillor Stadnichuk on the intention of the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Stadnichuk, can you answer that for me, please?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. We heard from delegations, and I've heard from emails that sometimes the filter breaks, or that people have had difficulty. So I don't know. I'm just going to say what I have heard is that some people have difficulty proving that they have a lead service connection, and that they're asked many questions, and that it can be a lot of work before they get a filter. So that is what I'm told. Administration is saying they're providing it. I think that we need to do everything in our power to make sure that we make the filters available. So part of this motion is to take whatever work it takes, if it's communication, education, distribution, whatever it takes, to make sure that more people are aware of the program. And someone else mentioned to me they did not realize, well, it was in the delegation, they did not know that in the budget discussions that we had earlier this in December, that that the lead service filter rebate was extended, that the filter program was extended. So for whatever reasons that people don't get the information, I think with lower income people, or maybe they're renters, I know that administration and committee was saying that they do try to send information directly to households. But if people, for whatever reason, are not maybe reviewing all their mail, or they've got hectic lives, or I don't know all of the reasons, and that's part of the I think our challenge is to make sure that no matter what kinds of difficulties people are facing in their lives, that they have safe water.
Okay, I can't support that. I believe I have a pretty hectic life, and if I ever once heard there might be lead in my water, I would do my due diligence, and the city is offering all of this stuff for them. And as an adult, I believe that's my responsibility to further this through, and the city is offering to bring the filter to the house. It's not like we're asking somebody that's a little old grandma that doesn't drive to come to City Hall and pick it up. So I believe that the city administration is doing everything it possibly can to mitigate this concern, and I don't feel that we need to do anything more. So, all right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Mr. Onright, you wish to speak?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So through whichever option council picks, we will have enhanced communication. And that'll be done through the community associations. And as I indicated before, we will look at online service, whether or not that will work or not, and how we can communicate to the majority of the people that have lead service connections, whether that be in the 3,600 or the additional 3,600 on the private side.
Councillor Stevens, I apologize. I believe you were up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll start with an undertaking in the spirit of engagement and communication. It's one thing to just lump this on administration's shoulders, but it's another to provide some recommendations. So the undertaking is specific to how we engage residents and ensure that there are fewer barriers to accessing filters and filter rebates. So my recommendations as an undertaking, in addition to the filter drop-off proposal, we consider an online-based application form and processing system, as well as simplified documentation requirements. I think it's also important in the communications that we make clear that all residents, not just property owners, are entitled to filters and rebates, and that the communication identifies the meaning of test results in comparison to established public health guidelines. I've worked with residents in this process before, and I've also heard from them just now. I think some of this is just a matter of revising emails, as well as making sure that it's easy to find those forms, download them, and submit them online. That's an undertaking for administration to consider as it goes forward. We have a member of the Saskatchewan Health Authority here. If I could ask them a question, Madam Chair.
Please go right ahead.
My question is, can we count on the Saskatchewan Health Authority to monitor and report on the public health implications associated with lead consumption in Regina, which includes testing for lead concentrations higher than average levels in our city?
Hi, thank you for the question. So we don't typically receive the elevated lead results. That's the issue with us. So we're dependent on the residents to contact us directly or from the program. So there's nothing in place right now to do that. But we would definitely reach out to them, but it's not something that we have at our disposal at this time. I think we'd have to establish with the provincial lab. So it's possible, it's just not done. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, could it be? So what would it take for the Sask Health Authority to deal with this public health issue in a proactive way?
Yeah, I think working with the city, which we're doing right now as well with the lead replacement program, is number one. It's just trying to get other stakeholders involved as well. I can speak for ourselves, but we definitely do want to assist. But it's the hurdles right now. I guess I'm not sure how to get the lab reports to us, how to get those results to us so that we can be proactive. It's more of a reactive thing as we're doing right now. So it's something we have to investigate and work with your group to kind of establish some protocols.
Okay, thank you. So a second undertaking would be for city administration to work with the Sask Health Authority, have a dialogue about a more proactive approach to dealing with this public health issue. I have an amendment I'd like to propose. I believe Amber has that. This first amendment is that the upfront administration fee of $365 be waived for the 10-year equalized payment plan. Amber, if you want to bring that up, or if you need me to send it again, I certainly will.
I just want to clarify for council. The original mover, Councillor Hawkins, to the main motion, accepted Councillor Stadnichuk's language around a robust water filter distribution plan as part of the main motion. So that's what we've been speaking to right now. Councillor Stevens is putting forward an amendment, so conversation will switch to discussion on the amendment, but Councillor Stevens, I'll let you go when Amber's got that.
Thank you. Just as Amber's putting it up, just to clarify, this is the fee associated with the low-income payment equalization plan. So it's a fee associated with accessing that service. It's part of program support options 3 and 4. and when it's up, I'll need a seconder. Thank you. So I guess I would appreciate a seconder for this to enter discussion.
Stadler.
Thank you. I would ask administration to correct my numbers if I'm off the mark, but this is simply a financial issue. So currently, as it stands, for you to access the private side connection support, there is a $365 fee that would then stretch the costs associated with the private side connection over a decade. My estimate is this would cost annually roughly between $30,000 and $93,000, depending on the option we settle on. So in the 15-year model, I estimate it would be a $30,000 a year cost just to waive this. And I base that on an assumption that there is 40% of low-income households accessing this program. So the numbers could certainly fluctuate, but my benchmark is that 40% of the applicants to this to the annual 240 line replacements would be low income. And this is speculative, but it's over double the low income household numbers in Regina. But if the administration has numbers that can confirm or clarify my own projections here, I would appreciate it. But this is pretty simple. If you're low income, you shouldn't have to pay the highest upfront administration fee for this service. I'll leave it at that for the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I'll just have administration speak to that.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So the work that we did looking at this program, the administration fee follows the same program or similar program that Saskatoon has. I'm going to ask Mr. Doney to comment on whether or not we know what percentage we have a low-income residents that utilize the program or would utilize.
Through you, Mayor Masters, through our modeling work, we had to make a few assumptions, and just like Councillor Stevens has indicated, it is variable, but we did assume somewhere between 20 and 40% of residents may access the low-income plan. So that's the estimate, and we don't expect removing this from the fee structure would have a material impact on the overall utility model.
That Councillor Stevens has moved and Councillor Stanachuk has seconded to waive the administration fee of $365 for the 10-year equalized payment plan. And if I've got this correct, Councillor Stevens, the 10-year equalized payment plan will be available for those individuals who apply for it, who qualify for a low-income equalized payment.
That's correct.
Any members of council wish to speak to the amendment? Seeing none? Oh, pardon me, Councillor Moll.
Okay, should that not be spelled out in the amendment that it applies to low income only?
Councillor Stevens, did you wish to address that question?
Sure. So if you want it in there, that's fine. The 10-year equalization payment plan is spelled out in the report as one of the support options. So it's just presumed, but waived for the low-income 10-year equalization payment plan would suffice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Clerk is making that adjustment right now. Councillor Stadnichuk, do you agree with that change as you're the seconder on the amendment?
Yes, indeed. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Moll, did you have any other question on that?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mancinelli.
I actually bumped enter by accident. I'll just have my name hovering there again instead, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to Councillor Stevens' amendment, I will begin with him, please.
In support.
Councillor Mole.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
Opposed.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
The amendment carries 10 to 1, Mayor. You're back to Councillor Stevens.
Councillor Stevens, we're back to you now
Thank
that
you.
the amendment has been accepted. Do you have anything further to
Thank
say on
you.
the main motion?
Yes, I would like to advance another amendment, and that is that we pursue replacement option 3, the 2031 completion timetable, instead of the 15-year plan. So just to be clear, that council works towards the 10-year completion time frame rather than 15. I'll need a seconder for that. And I believe Amber will be putting that up on the screen.
LeBlanc.
Thank you. I'll just ask you to we're just going to take a few minutes. Deputy Clerk is having a few technical difficulties here while we get this up.
How's that 3:15? There we go. No. That's the same one.
Super good, Amber. Can I just ask him? Council, can one of you verify when you can see the amendment?
Got it.
Got it, perfect. Councillor Stevens, please proceed.
Great, thank you. I do appreciate administration's work in providing us the costs and implications of 3 different options. I do appreciate the balance that they've struck. However, a councillor who represents communities with roughly half of all the lead service connections in Regina, and is someone who has supported the initial 5-year time frame that was proposed and acknowledged in 2019. I would be remiss if I did not at least attempt to reduce that time frame. I think another worthy note is that a substantial portion of these lead service connections are located in North Central, which is one of the most marginalized urban communities in Saskatchewan. And I think there will be a struggle, regardless of supports, to ensure that all the mitigation measures are in place to ensure that people are not drinking lead. So for these reasons, the costing is all embedded in the report. Administration has provided us with an outline of the costs. I understand the financial challenges. I guess I would argue that this is the time frame that we need to work towards. As a follow-up question to administration, can we align this project, any of the options we pursue, with requests from the province or the federal government for infrastructure dollars?
Mr. Unright?
Through your worship, I'll ask Mr. Doney to comment.
Through you, Mayor Masters, regardless of which option council approves regarding the replacement schedule, we would be looking for any provincial and federal funding for water, wastewater, or drainage projects that might be eligible, and lead service connections can definitely be one of those requests.
Great, thank you. My second and final question, how does the city prioritize which areas would receive replacement first? So, for instance, could it prioritize households with the highest concentration of lead? Could it prioritize areas based on socio-demographic factors? Just walk me through how that triage system works.
Mr. Unright?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll ask Mr. Doney to comment.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So there's two different ways that we currently prioritize lead service connection replacements. One is in coordination with our road program and our other underground work, and so we ensure that we coordinate that. The other is residents' requests. So if resident requests to have it changed and they've changed the private side of lead service connection, the city will come in and change out the public side of the lead service connection.
Okay, thank you. I think the report is clear, as is administration's data on this, so I'll just leave it to to council to decide on this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor LeBlanc?
Thank you. I want to speak in favor of this on three main grounds. So the first one is that this is clearly a health issue. I think it's obvious this wouldn't have come up from 2050 to 2036 in the recommendation unless it was a health issue, even despite the filter program we have. I think there's a fundamental question about whether we provide safe infrastructure or whether we just mitigate the risks that exist. So I want to suggest if we had an unsafe road, we wouldn't just suggest people get safer vehicles to drive on it. We'd fix the road. We had a dangerous playground. We wouldn't just give kids helmets. We'd fix the playground. We have unsafe drinking water. We ought to fix that lead service connection rather than just providing filtration systems. That's point one. Point two is I think the delegate from the community association was dead on. This is our most fundamental obligation. If we're not fulfilling this, we're really failing as a municipality. So it's a health issue and it ought to be top priority. The third is two comments about the map in Appendix C about where these lead service connections are. So I want to make two comments about that. The first is I understand a few councillors who live outside of the areas on that map might feel uncomfortable about spending their residents' money on things that only benefit people in the core of the city. I want to suggest that we do that all the time. Think about a local neighborhood park. We regularly spend money on things that disproportionately benefit one community, and then the favor is returned later. That's the way it happens when you live in community. So I say that shouldn't be a barrier. The second is that this map lines up pretty well with the area we're trying to get more people to live in as we become a sustainable, green transit-friendly city. I want to say it's hard to get people to come live in an area when the water's not safe to drink. So speeding this timeline along actually aligns with that priority too. I agree with the community association delegate that by all rights, we really should be aiming for 5 years. We should have the aggressive approach, but I understand that might not be the one this council's keen on. So I think the 10 years strikes the right balance. We'd replace 360 lead service connections a year, and that would lead to one additional 2% tax increase on the utility in 2023. I suggest Saskatoon is not a public health haven or beacon by any sort, but we can surely do 3/4 of what they do. We would do 360 to their 480. Finally, I want to address a comment Mr. Onright made about replacing these sooner will lead to currently good roads to deteriorate faster. And just the point that if I had to pick between having a good road out front of my house and good water within it, I would definitely pick good water within it. I think that's the choice we ought to make here, including for the reasons our delegates suggested. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify something in relation to the number of and our numbers of lead service connections. So what I heard is that we don't know, and just to clarify, is that what we don't know is how many private connections there are. Is that accurate? Through the chair.
Through you, Mayor Masters. We estimate that to be 7,000 to 8,000. We don't, in many cases, have the specific addresses.
Okay, so when we're sending out letters to residents saying that they are eligible for a filter or a rebate, there are folks who are being missed because we don't actually know the total numbers of lead service connections in the city right now.
Through you, Mayor Masters, that is correct.
Mm-hmm.
There are approximately 3,800 to 4,000 letters that go out each year.
Okay, so I think that that alone tells us that our stopgap measure of providing filters and rebates to folks isn't good enough. Some folks are being missed in the communication because we don't know the total amount of lead service connections in the city. For that reason, I think that's reason enough alone to support an expedited timeline. I definitely support the 10-year option for that reason and the others that have already been mentioned so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much. As I said in my opening, I would support doing this as quickly as possible. There's no doubt that it's a priority. That said, there are certain practical considerations to be taken into account. The administration has considered those carefully and laid them out to us. To go to from a 15 to a 10-year time period will double the cost of doing this work. That is not insignificant. Not only that, it'll mean there'll be coordination problems with street repair, with traffic in neighborhoods. Again, it's not like we're saying to anybody, you have to drink lead-filled water. What we're saying is, if you've got a concern, you will be able to access a robust program on the part of the city to get a water filter. And over the course of the next 15 years, we will solve this problem. But to try and cram it into a shorter period than the one recommended by the administration is going to mean one of two things. Either it's going to mean that water rates go up quite dramatically, which is not something that helps low-income people, as they have explained to us, or it means we're going to have to make very difficult choices in our priorities. For example, it may mean that there's less money for assisted housing. It may mean there's less money to repair roads. It seems to me that the administration has proposed a very reasonable compromise, The difficulty that we can't reach everybody all at once is corrected by a robust water filter supply program. And I think those two things suggest the city has taken this to heart and has provided a very balanced program. And for that reason, I think we should stick to the 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Seeing no one further, I will ask the city clerk to call, oh, actually, Councillor Stevens, you can close out debate if you like.
Nothing further.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. City clerk, could you please call the vote on the amendment to go to a 10-year timetable for replacement of the lead service?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll begin with Councillor Stevens again, please.
In support.
Councillor Bresciani.
Opposed.
Councillor Findura.
Opposed.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
Opposed.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
Opposed.
Councillor Moore.
Opposed.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins.
Opposed.
Mayor Masters.
Opposed.
The amendment is defeated 4-7. Mayor? If he has time left up.
Councillor Stevens, you can continue on if you like, if there's anything else you wish to speak to.
Nothing further. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor LeBlanc, I believe you're on the list next for the main motion.
My issue is raised, actually. Thank you. I'm fine at this point.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. I believe I just have one question, which is, so the $100 rebate, is that, do we know if that covers the complete costs of a water filter? It depends on the filter they get. How does that option work?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So that covers the cost of 4 filters that the city would provide. If the resident chooses to do something different, and that cost was $500, the $100 rebate will go back against that. So it actually is a credit in that case on the water bill.
Okay, and to receive that rebate, do folks need to provide a receipt in relation to whatever they've purchased in lieu of using the city-provided filters?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Councillor Mancinelli.
Thank you. I have a question through the chair. In this discussion, it's been revealed we don't entirely know exactly how many connections we're dealing with. Throughout the pandemic and before, there's been much news about wastewater sampling for different problems, from COVID to even finding gold within wastewater. I'm wondering from the person from the water agency if there's been any thought to monitoring our wastewater for effect on the amount of lead found in there as we go through the process of removing the lead pipes in our city, to give us an insight on how much effect we're having and an idea of possibly how many unknown connections might be left.
Through you, Mayor Masters, I believe we have a representative from the Health Authority, not the Water Authority.
Oh, sorry, sure. I got my officials mixed up, sorry.
But I'll ask Mr. Doney to comment.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So as mentioned, there has been some work regarding COVID and wastewater. We have not taken the steps to try to test the wastewater for lead, primarily because we know where the lead service connections are, the area. One thing I will comment on is, as we roll out the AMI water meter project over the next 5 years, we will be into every home, and that is an excellent opportunity for the city to determine what is on the private side. So that may be one way that we will be able to coordinate and to find out the private side lead service connection with residents.
Sounds good. I just thought I could mention it, thought of it out of the box. And just a follow-up comment to this, reading the report, you'll notice that the status quo was at 2050. This is something that is taken seriously, and I'm glad to see that it is being accelerated. Sorry I couldn't support the 10-year plan, but there are a lot of responsibilities, as Councillor Hawkins alluded to. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to ask administration as well. I know Montreal has done some work in this, and I'd like to also make a comment that we're not unlike any other city where it's low on the intake of filters. It's the kind of the reading that I did in other cities. It's very common. I agree that we need to do more and try and engage as many residents as we can. But one of the things that Montreal did is they found that as much as the city was doing, the residents were not moving forward as fast to put their side in. So they actually formed a bylaw or considered a bylaw. And I'm just wondering, was there ever discussion, anything like that, where we move forward, where we would, or could we do some research in considering drafting a bylaw that may require owners to move forward with the work? Because if the city does the work, does it, and the owners then, I mean, can pay over time. But is that something that was ever looked at? Could I ask the administration that, please?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So the program that we've outlined, if the city is doing the connection on the public side, then the resident, the private side will have to be done. That's where the funding options are in place. I'll ask Mr. Doney in their research what they found. So I believe, Councillor Bresciani, what you're referring to is the balance of the private side only.
Yes.
How that could be dealt with. So I'll ask Mr. Doney to comment.
Through you, Mayor Masters. Yeah, so as Mr. Allwright outlined, the recommendations before you do include mandatory private side replacement when the city side is replaced. So that is for the approximately 3,600 connections. The other connections could be something that council could consider in the future as this program is rolled out, depending on the uptake of the private side replacement. Providing these two program support options are really the first step to reduce the financial impact for private side replacement by spreading it out over 5 years or 10 years. So in the future, council could consider something to mandate private side replacement where there is no public side replacement. But at this point, we haven't recommended that. Some cities are moving in that direction, but typically it's when they're further down the path of removing all of their public side lead service connections.
Thank you for that clarification. I too would, I remember this coming first to council, and it was, again, the 2050. And so I know for, it may seem like the 15-year is quite a ways away. I would say that coming from the 2050 down, I would say that the city has done their work to ensure that we can to try and reduce this as much as possible. But I also want to ensure that I would like to ask, will there be a report coming back to let us know how we've done in the next year or two, or how does that work through the chair?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mayor Masters. Yes, we can bring an update back through, it would come through Ops Committee. And that could be annually or every 2 years. I would maybe suggest that we get 2 years into the program and then bring a report and an update back to committee and council.
Thank you, through the chair. I would appreciate that undertaking. It would give us kind of a bird's eye view as to kind of how we're doing with both the filters, but as well as the work. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I have a couple. Given our kind of lack of exact addresses, how confident are we in the city records that we're purporting to quote here at 3,644.95? How confident are we?
Through you, Mayor Masters, on the public side, very confident. On the private side, we're taking age of area and doing an estimate based on that. Mr. Doney, do you have any further comment?
Through you, Mayor Masters, as Mr. Onright mentioned, we have more confidence in the public side. Public side lead service connections, and the private side is truly based on age of homes, and so we have less confidence in those numbers.
Thank you. I do have a question, and Mr. Holden, perhaps this one is for you or returning members of council. There was a decision referenced by one of the delegates, a council decision to get this done in 5 years. That was unanimous. Can you help me understand how 5 became 30, which is now 15?
So through your worship, I think the recommendation from council was to look at 5 years, and then it was for us to take away and bring further reports. And that's where we are today.
Got it. Thank you. Further to Councillor Bresciani's comment in terms of getting some feedback, I think I would just add to that, whatever the plan is relative to engagement in that robust plan, Councillor Stanichuk's friendly amendment to Councillor Hawkins, I think 2 years might be a little bit touch long, so, you know, at some point in time, if it's not too onerous, just to come back with what it is you've done with that. Go ahead, Mr. Onright.
Through you, Mayor Masters, we can bring back an annual update if that's what council would like.
Okay. I think given the importance of the issue, based upon health, based upon some of the concerns of the local.
Yep.
Further to that, Mr. Onright, Councillor Hawkins, could I ask if you would accept that as a friendly amendment to your original motion, just that we received just an annual update from administration relative to the motion?
Yes.
Okay, and Councillor Stevens, I believe you're the seconder. Would you be okay with that friendly amendment?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Onright. Councillor Hawkins, I can throw it back to you to close if you like.
I'll be very brief. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to assure the residents of Regina that they have very safe, very clean drinking water. The council takes that matter seriously, that with respect to lead, we have put in place a very viable program to remove lead piping from the city side. And we have provided an interim measure through the water filter program, which when you take the two together means that nobody in Regina should be finding themselves drinking water with lead in it. I think it's important, though, to stress to the public that water is a top priority, and we are putting in place a program which will maintain the safe and clean drinking water that Regina citizens enjoy. I'd ask council to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Mr. Clerk, I'd ask that you please call the vote on the motion as amended.
Thank you, Mayor. I will begin with Councillor Hawkins, please.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Moore.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Carries 11-0. Mayor?
We'll consider item CR 21-88, Land Development Master Plan Consulting Services, over $750,000. Deputy Mayor Stevens, can I ask that you introduce the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I get a seconder for this, please?
Stadnichuk.
Great, thank you. The request is quite straightforward. It is a request for funding to support the development of a land development master plan aimed at, as the report suggests, developing, I believe, about 5 parcels of city-owned land. I'll pass it over to administration to provide an overview of what this entails, the timeline, and the implications for the future.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters, just to follow up on Councillor Stevens' remarks, the report is seeking approval to engage consulting and professional services over $750,000 to support land development planning related to developable lands held by the city, specifically lands in Riverside, Hawkstone, Taylorfield, Queens and Parliament, and Towns North neighborhoods. And this work to be undertaken includes assessing requirements to service the lands and geotechnical and environmental assessments, and we anticipate this work will occur through this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And this information that will be received from this work will be used to develop high-level financial plans that project the ROI, the return on investment, in developing these lands, residual land values, and approaches on how and when the land should be developed, including a development approach for each of those land parcels. Thank you.
The floor is open to members of council. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. I asked this question or a similar question at committee, and I just think that it's worth asking again, perhaps a little differently. I think that some of our residents will wonder what is the relationship between the land development master plan and the lands that are potentially going to be developed by Viterra. So the question being, why didn't we do this before that happened, or are we doing this because of that project? So if you could just comment on the relationship, if any, between those two, I think that might answer some residents' questions. Through the chair, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. So those 5 parcels of lands that I had mentioned in my opening remarks of where kind of our focus has been in the short to medium term with respect to land development. The lands in North Regina that relate to the item that was before council a number of months ago relating to the land option purchase agreement with Viterra. That was those lands have been tagged as future industrial development, and the Viterra opportunity was actually one that was unexpected, and so one that we had moved on specifically related to development of that parcel of land that Viterra was interested in. So it wasn't something that was in our short to medium term view and perspective. This report before you speaks to those 5 parcels of land. I think there's an opportunity as we go through that work, whether at some future point we add those lands north of the city to this review as well. That would likely require additional budget to what we have right now. So I wouldn't rule that out at this point in time, but the focus of these lands, this report and this work is on those 5 parcels of land. The Viterra piece was an unexpected opportunity that we felt was an important opportunity for the city to pursue, and that's why that was kind of outside of these 5 lands. Again, does not preclude us coming back to council, I think, as we work through this and make a determination of whether it makes sense to add the additional lands to this work at a future point in time.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Masters. These 5 parcels of lands are going to be developed out within the next 5 years through the chair, or how many years?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So all the parcels, I believe, and I'll have Ms. Bizdell confirm this, of the 5 parcels I mentioned, they're all within the city's 300,000 growth developmental pieces of land. The one that's outside of that is Towns North, but we are currently developing Towns South, and so I think it's just a natural extension to do this additional work on Towns North when those lands open up for development. I'll ask Ms. Bisdell to comment if she has any additional comment.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the timing of these lands, as Mr. Lacey had indicated, they are within the immediate development time frame, with the exception of the Towns North. The time that it'll take to fully develop them will really depend on market and what the serviceability. So that's really why we need to do this, to understand, is now the right time to develop them.
Thanks, Kate. So if Towns North, and that's how many years out, why would we include that now? Wouldn't that then fit us under the 750,000? Why would we do that now if it's going to be a ways out where some of these assessments would no longer be, I guess, valid? Through the chair?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I will ask Ms. Dell to expand on the importance of including Towns North in this work.
Through you, Mayor Masters, as I'd indicated, these are within the 300 growth POP developable lands. They are an extension to the town south. It is important that we do the evaluation on these lands so we can future plan how we develop these lands out.
Through the chair, so Towns North would be developed approximately, are we talking 10 years out, 15 years out, or how long? Approximately.
Through you, Mayor Madams, I would estimate that, again, depending on the market, that the Towns North could be developed, could start development, and depending on the phasing, I'm not exactly sure where we are at with fully developed phase 1 lands within the 300 POP, anywhere between 5 to 15 years.
Okay. I understood from Mr. Lacey that this was going to be, could be somewhat of a looking at priorities to see, which one would go first. That would help us. I guess I'm going to ask is would there be a concern that we do all of this work, and I'm going to give an example, would be the rail lands. We put how many, I'm not sure, hundreds of thousands, if not a million into that, looking at doing all of the work there. And I'm not sure it's still where we are even on those lands. And I guess I want to learn from that. Can you provide any information how that would be different compared to those lands, through the chair?
Through you, Mayor Masters, sorry. That's exactly the kind of work that we need to do. Now, the yards land, the technical evaluation that we've done there is much more detailed because we have enough information to pretty much go into concept planning right away. Now, everything that we have done is still valid. That evaluation does not expire over time. What would change potentially is if there was a significant change in proposed land use. So we would still evaluate if there was a change of direction on how those lands should be developed. We would have to update that, but it wouldn't be starting over. We would have all of that background information that we would just add on to.
Thank you. We have done a lot of work on some of these, and some have had some kind of survey work or engineering work or some kind of work that's been done, assessments on them. Are we going to then share that with the contractors or whoever we're going to be contracting with, be able to utilize all of the work that's being done? And wouldn't that then save the city dollars because we've done some of the work already to fit under that 750,000 within that budget of the 750,000 through the chair?
Through you, Madam Mayor, or sorry, Madam Masters, Mayor Masters. I'm not sure I understand. So are you referring to the yards technical evaluation?
No.
Okay, so with regards to the other parcels of land, if there is any evaluation of those lands that we have, which to my understanding we don't have a lot, it would build on that. So yes, it wouldn't be rework for sure if we have any of the information. So from the city perspective on the city infrastructure, that would be used by our consultants. They would not have to recreate that. They would basically be looking at on-site servicing and how that connects to the city services.
Okay. So just to be clear, so the original amount was 750, but this, we know now this is going to be over the 750 and it's going to be around the 1.2. Is that accurate through the chair?
Through the chair, we've always estimated this was going, we budgeted just over 1 million to do all of this work. The administration bylaw requires council approval if we are going to enter into a consulting contract that is greater than 750. So never did we expand that from 750. It's just an administrative requirement to have council approve that spend over 750 with on consulting services.
Through the chair, then sorry, I maybe don't understand. Then how do we know that it's going to be over the 750,000?
How do we?
So we put it out
through the chair. How we know that is just based on the estimated amount of work that has to be done on each parcel. So due diligence on land evaluations of this nature is approximately, we're budgeting $200,000 per parcel approximately.
So we have a land development or real estate, which is with an area within the city. Why can it not be done within the city staff that we have? We've got engineers, we've got Shauna, we've got you, why can it not be done within city services, within that city development area? Through the chair.
Through the chair, the land development and real estate branches, land development, I will say, branch is exactly comparable to a private developer. So if we were to have city staff perform this type of an evaluation, could they? Perhaps. We haven't looked at that. If Dream, for example, had to do their evaluation and they saw that we were having city staff do ours, they would likely expect the same from city staff for their lands. We are essentially comparable to a private developer. So there is a separation between the developer and the regulator. We have to do this work and then hand it over to the regulator to evaluate and ensure accuracy and that it meets all of the city standards and requirements.
Okay. And you're saying that regulator is who you're going to contract with. Is that accurate?
Sorry, through the chair. No, not at all. We will be contracting with private engineering firms, consulting firms to do the work, similar to a private developer. A private developer would consult with a private engineering firm.
Right. So you're going to consult with a private engineering firm to all of these 5 parcels of land to get the amount, and we've come up with it'll be over the 750,000 to get all of that assessment done. And the city has done some assessment, but I just want to be clear. I did ask that we've got a real estate or a development, a land development, which is within the city, but you're saying that it would not be right for us to do our own work on our own city land.
Through the chair, correct. We are very separate and apart. Even though we are considered administration, we are considered land development administration, not regulator. So it's very important that we keep our roles separate for transparency.
Councillor Bresciani, could I have...
I'll leave it there.
I'll have Mr. Lacey actually respond as well to some of your questions here.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. So just maybe a few comments to summarize what Ms. Bisdell was articulating, and then maybe just some additional information. So the city has really two distinct roles with respect to land development. For all land development that occurs in the city, whether it's the city doing the development as a land developer or a private developer, we, all developers, need to deal with the regulatory side of the city to get the necessary approvals, et cetera, to move forward with land development. And that's through our planning department, which falls under Ms. Hauerluck. And so this relates to what I would call the actual land development or business side of land development, where when the city develops its own lands, it's very much like a land developer, like a private sector land developer. And it's important to keep those two distinct in that the regulator, in our view, needs to treat the city as a land developer the same as it would a private sector land developer developing land. The only other comment I would make, just with respect to utilizing city staff for this work, so one is the importance of keeping a separation between the land developer and the regulator. The second piece, however, is that even if we looked at that, the staff, the engineering staff, et cetera, in the planning branch are fully engaged with respect to the work plan that they have around engineering work that needs to be done with respect to the city's ability overall to supply capacity in the city with respect to water and wastewater, and also engaged in future planning with respect to what the city needs to do to bring those services basically to that property where the property is being developed. This work really looks then at servicing those lands once the city's brought that service basically to the property. So while it's similar work, it is different work. And with respect to city resources, what the city has are already fully engaged with kind of that city building work.
Okay. I think that's, I'll leave it there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Stadnichuk.
No, that must have been from before the break. Oh, no, my name did go up. Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Councillor Shaw.
Hi, Councillor Bresciani asked a lot of the questions I had, and I'm just trying to go back to my notes from our ED meeting. We're budgeting about $200,000 a parcel. Am I correct in that, through you, Madam Mayor?
Through you, Mayor Masters, so yes, that is what our land development branch is budgeting. At the end of the day, these services are going to be acquired through an RFP process or through a tendering process. And so at the end of the day, it'll be the market that dictates, what the cost is going to be to undertake this work. So what we have in the report is our estimate at this point in time, given past experience when we sought these services in the past.
So just kind of a follow-up question, and please forgive me for my ignorance on this. We talked lots about how a lot of the stuff has already been done through City Admin from before, and we can utilize some of this going forward. Now, my question is, if we're going through this, why did we do any of the pre-work before, through you, Madam Mayor?
So through you, Mayor Masters, thank you for the question and the opportunity to me to correct the record here. So, while there may have been some work done on these land parcels, we believe it's been very minimal. And as a result, any of that work, though, that has been done, for example, we believe there may have been some work done in Parliament and Queen, but it would have been very minimal. We'll obviously share with whoever we engage to do this additional work, so we're not redoing that work, or they're not redoing that work. The reality is these land parcels that we've referred to have had minimal work done around looking at servicing requirements, environmental and geotechnical work. Where we have done substantial work is in the yards. The yards is not part of this piece because we've done that work there already.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you guys for clarifying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any other members of council? Thank you. Councillor Mole.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I mentioned something about this at executive, so I'm pleased to hear a lot of talk about the Hawkstone area. As I've communicated with a lot of the residents in that area. The residents have mentioned to me the need of a second road in and out of the area. So I'm curious about the time frame, the development of the area. I heard you say immediate time frame, so what's the actual time frame?
So through you, Mayor Masters, I will refer that question to Ms. Bisdell, who may actually refer to Mr. Moraz, but I'll start with Ms. Bisdell.
Through you, Mayor Masters, I will actually refer that to Mr. Mraz.
Mr. Moraz, are you on the line?
Yes, Mayor Masters, sorry, we just had some technical glitches there. In terms of being, the Hawkstone lands, in terms of being immediately developable, that's within the city's official community plan in terms of the growth strategy. In terms of actually when they develop will depend more so on the market.
Okay, and we'll know where the market stand as a result of this study.
Through the chair, so the market, that would actually be separate work to accurately quantify the market. The market is strong right now, however, we don't know how deep that market is. This work is more about developing a budget for the land. We need to understand the profitability of the land at a minimum, so that if we decide to develop these lands, if there's a strong market, at some point we would have to come to council and go, here's a pro forma, here's a budget, here's how much money we think we can make on this land. Just speaking purely to profitability. We can't answer that question right now. If somebody came to me and said, Mr. Land Developer, how much money can we draw out of the Hawkstone land? I can't answer that. I can do a back of the napkin calculation, but I cannot give you a definitive answer. Never mind actually coming forward seeking some sort of investment funding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mole. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the question.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll begin with Councillor Stevens, please.
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Opposed.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Mole.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Carries 10-1, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now consider item CR 21-89, appointments to Regina Planning Commission and Community Wellness Committee. Deputy Mayor Stevens, can I ask you to introduce the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I get a seconder, please?
Second.
Bresciani.
All right, thanks, John. So two appointments, one to the Community Wellness Committee, Councillor Bob Hawkins, and another to the Regina Planning Commission, Mr. John Aston. I don't think there's anything else that we need to say.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor? Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
Thank you. I'll begin with Councillor Stevens, please.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Mole.
In favor.
Counselor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Counselor Hawkins.
In favor.
Counselor Bresciani.
In favor.
Counselor Findura.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Carries 11-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to CP 21-26, we do have a delegation on the item. I'd like to call upon delegation Julie Derby. Please introduce yourself for the record, the organization you're representing, if any, and where you reside. You have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions that members of Council may have for you. Good afternoon, Ms. Derby.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor Masters and Council members. My name is Julie Derby. I live in West Hill Park. And I just wanted to speak about the fact that I don't support the recommendation of OCS 21-20 regarding the stunting, racing, and excessive vehicular noise within the city limits, just for the following reasons. It's such a nominal fine increase that it'll do little to deter owners of loud vehicles and dangerous drivers from, stunting and driving in an erratic manner. The report did not address a proposal in MN 20-17 that called for an increase of fines from the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., whereby it's there's a more serious and more dangerous increase of dangerous driving in between these hours. Also, the environmental and safety factors, the berms and roadway designs, speed limits, long-haul truckers, heavy trucks, it contributes to the amplification of, the vehicle noise and it impacts the neighborhoods that are adjacent to these high-speed roadways. Especially, where we live, coming off of the bypass along 9th Avenue Northwest, having the berm there, it's incredibly loud. It's quite the little drag strip on Friday and Saturday evenings. And it's just simply not a very wide roadway, no shoulder. They've put up some yellow pylons to sort of mitigate the dangers of driving along this road, but you add speed and a mixture of vehicles driving at high rates of speed along with cyclists that are driving along this roadway. It's a recipe for a safety disaster. Also, there was really no I don't see that there was any public consultation conducted for this report. There's no mention of specific areas or anything conducted with the Regina Police Service or anything that I've heard of in liaising with the Regina Police Service for maybe some recommendations along this road. So maybe it might warrant a larger increase of a fine. I think $250 is too low. I don't know, unlike maybe it should be something like out east, the city of Ottawa, they put in I believe it's $500. And it's an even higher fine between certain hours, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And they've, introduced new fines just for stunting and racing. So yeah, and then just some more enforced, speed, enforcement along for racing. It seems like there's a police presence maybe on a Monday afternoon, but there's nothing on a Friday and Saturday night when this occurs. And also maybe it's a matter of extending the speed. The speed project that the Regina Police Service has come up with, maybe extending that beyond April to May. Maybe it needs to be extended throughout the summer months. But yeah, I think that it's in our area, it's really bad with the development of Coopertown, or the potential development. Coopertown or Dream has put up, or whatever the development company's name is, they've put up a berm, and the noise just deflects off of this berm and into where we live. It's incredibly loud. You can't sit on your back deck. And I invite, anybody from the City Council, and along with yourself, Mayor Masters, to come out, have a look and a listen, and to see. Also, these yellow markers that the city has put up to sort of increase safety, they're being knocked down continuously, and the city's continuously having to put them back up, and it's quite a mess. And it's an accident waiting to happen. It's definitely, not only noise, but a safety issue as well. So that's, so I support the recommendation, maybe even to submit a letter to the minister responsible for, under SGI, to maybe implement stricter measures regarding vehicle standards and inspection, and just to also help reduce, this excessive vehicle noise. Yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you for the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Derby, very much for your presentation. Council, do any members of council have question of the delegate? Hearing none, I'll thank you again very much for your presentation this afternoon, Ms. Derby, and ask that you please leave the meeting now.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a communication on item CR 21-91, stunting racing and excessive vehicle noise within city limits, from Lori and Wendy Walter. Can I have someone move a motion to receive and file communication CP 21-26?
Hawkins, so moved.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Bresciani, I have you as seconder. Any opposed? Carried. We will now consider item CR 21-91, stunting racing, excessive vehicle noise within city limits. And prior to handing it off, I just want to advise council that we do have Constable Gregory Crowitz from the Regina Police Service available to answer any questions of council during debate. Councillor Hawkins, can I ask you to introduce the report?
Thank you very much, Mayor Masters. I move the recommendations as set out. Could I get a seconder for them? Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Masters, this matter was considered at some length by the Ops Committee. We particularly noted that this is a problem that is, as the delegation pointed out, very disruptive. It's disruptive at certain times of the year, especially now as spring comes on, and in the fall it's disruptive. I know along Gordon Road in Ward 2, and I know Councillor Bresciani has had, in her areas, had street racing. We discussed at length the level of the fine. It was initially set as a recommendation at $150. It was moved up to $250 by the committee. I'm wondering if I could get, through you, Councillor Crowitz, through you, Mayor Master, Constable Crowitz, to comment on fines and what other possible measures are available to the police in enforcing laws against stunt driving, excessive vehicle noise, and so on.
Yes, I can definitely comment on the fines and the fine structure. When we originally talked about the fines with the $150, that was in line with the other fines that we as police can write under the noise bylaw for such things as a loud party or a barking dog, which matched up with that. In terms of our other avenues of fines, we do have the Traffic Safety Act available to us, which is available to all police officers across the province of Saskatchewan, which has a little more substantial fines to it and substantial penalties involved in it. For example, Operating an unregistered vehicle, $580. Driving without due care and attention has an escalating fine starting at $580, moving up to $1,400, and then $2,100. Speeding fines. These are some of the speeding fines we've written in the last 3 weeks. 144 kilometers an hour in a 70 zone, $1,067 fine. 96 kilometers an hour in a 50 zone, $753 fine. 121 kilometers an hour in a 50 zone, $1,033 fine. 139 kilometers an hour in a 70 zone, $1,011 fine. Additionally, we have things like the cell phone where it has the escalating fines as well that match the due care and attention. We do have the increased fine options out there when we deal with stunting, noisy vehicles, speeding, racing, and in all reality, a higher fine does not scare people anymore like it used to. I know when I was younger, I've been around for quite a while. If I had the fear of getting a fine of any kind of amount, I had that thought in my mind that I wouldn't conduct the activity to get that fine. We have some of these people that have received these $1,000 fines are repeat offenders in the last couple months. Increased fines aren't going to change anything. We need different avenues to do this, and we need different ways to enforce what we can enforce.
Is the criminal code also available to you? Dangerous driving under the criminal code?
Yes, the criminal code is also available to us in certain situations. Dangerous driving, criminal negligence will come into play under certain circumstances as well. Absolutely.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'm wondering, Constable, if you can address the enforcement question raised by the delegation, who spoke very movingly about the noise problem that they're facing on 9th Avenue North. What kind of enforcement do we have to deal with stunt driving, excessive noise, dangerous driving?
Yeah, so the traffic safety unit currently consists of 12 officers in total, which is 2 shifts of 6 members on each shift. We are, unfortunately, during this time, just due to need, we are a part-time traffic safety unit. We do not have coverage on the roads 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We just don't have the manpower to do that. So we enforce when we can, when we work our 12-hour shifts. So sometimes, yes, we are available on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but we don't have a traffic team working on a Friday night or a Saturday night because of the way shifting works. So we're just not available. What we try to do, like we do with Project Speed in the spring from April to May every year, is we bring in our traffic members on their off time to work these projects, but that comes at a considerable cost because it's overtime. And our budget to do that is very limited. And we have spent that money already. Now that we're at the end of May, to bring in these additional officers to do the enforcement. We enforce the best we can with what we have, and we continue to do it year round. We generally do the spring project because that's when a lot of these vehicles come out of storage from the winter, and it starts to amp up more than usual, which is why we run them in April and May.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor, these considerations were taken into account by the Ops Committee when we raised the number from 150 to 250 for the fine. We also heard that if the fine gets raised much beyond that, police enforcement becomes a little less. There's a reluctance to issue fines, and we heard that it's more difficult to get convictions in court if the fine is considered to be too high. So all in all, what the committee did was it looked at the whole basket of enforcement provisions and thought that $250 was the right amount. I'll leave it there, Mayor Masters.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Shaw.
There we go. Constable, it's Cowitz?
Crowitz or crevettes, whichever you prefer.
Okay, I'll go with Cowitz because I'm not French yet. I have a couple questions in regard to where, now I'm just learning this, so please forgive me for my ignorance. Do you guys have anything in place to actually, for the noise and the stunting and stuff like that, is there anything in place for the noise violations that you guys can actually determine what the noise is and whether that's validated for a ticket through you, Madam Mayor?
No, there's nothing in terms of, say, a decibel reading that if a vehicle is at this many decibels, they're violating the noise bylaw. What it comes down to is a loud and unnecessary noise. So it's a judgment call on the officer. It's an officer opinion call. And the way I've explained it to people in the past when I've talked about it is, if I hear 3,000 cars driving down Albert Street and everything sounds the same, but I can hear your vehicle from 3 blocks away, that's loud and unnecessary. So that is, it's based on judgment and determination. Or we know that the topic of nights has come up here from the previous delegate. At night, sound travels a little more because there's less out there to stop the sound. So it's a little easier to hear something from a few blocks away. So we have to take into account, is that regular vehicle noise, or is that somebody doing something to maybe cause it to be a little bit louder? And that's how we base it, is on those judgments. We'll use simple things such as, I've used it in the past, I had all the vehicles on my, all the windows on my vehicle rolled up with my radio on. However, I could still hear their vehicle over top of my vehicle. And that's the kind of evidence that we use when we go into courts, and that's the kind of evidence that we've been successful with in the courts.
So technically, it's kind of like, there's, what I'm trying to figure out, is there actually a tool that says this is it, or is it kind of based on judgment? Like, I mean, speeding is 51, and we always leeway a couple of kilometers. Do you guys have anything like that in place? And if not, can we put something like that in place through you, Madam Mayor?
We don't have anything in place like that. There is, under the Canadian Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, which is the federal motor vehicle laws, they regulate sound on vehicles when they're manufactured from a company. And under the vehicle equipment regulations in the province, you can't exceed what the Canadian Motor Vehicle Safety Standards indicate. However, the testing procedure under the Canadian Motor Vehicle Safety Standards is so strict that it would cost us millions upon millions to build the facility and run the facility in order to conduct that kind of testing under those standards, because it has to be a completely isolated, soundproof area to run it. It's not something we can do just out on the side of the road with a decibel reader or anything like that.
Right. So that's kind of it makes it hard for you guys to do this, to inflict the tickets, and that's what my concern is. What do you feel is the best, through you, Madam Mayor? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I have a lot of these issues in my ward, and I've had a lot of people call me and stuff, and I don't know, because I don't have the history of how this all came into place, just from what Councillor Hawkins said. Is there anything that you feel that you, as the police service, obviously you guys have talked about it, that we could do better in crafting a bylaw, through you, Madam Mayor?
Oh, I don't know if I have an answer to that one off the top of my head. A lot of the things we need to enforce that are out there, either through the vehicle equipment regulations, the Traffic Safety Act, the noise bylaw, whatever we have out there. A big part of it is us being able to catch whoever is doing it in the first place, which is difficult under even the most ideal of circumstances, because a lot of times we get the phone call in, yeah, there's street racing going on Chuka Boulevard, which is a common one. By the time we get out to Chuka Boulevard, they're long gone. Right. So us being able to catch them is one of the limitations that we have, and there's really nothing we can do about that other than putting 7,000 officers on the street sitting at every single corner just waiting for something to happen, which obviously isn't a practical solution to the matter. Yeah, that's really what it comes down to, is us being able to be in the right place in the right time, or having the right information to be able to enforce, because that's generally what our hiccup comes from when we get something from a member of the public, is we'll get a video of a car doing a donut in a parking lot that they're taking from their balcony or their front porch, but it's a block and a half away and there's no way of identifying the vehicle. So we get a lot of complaints like that, where in all reality, there's nothing we can do about it because we can't identify anything involved with the offense itself. So that's our biggest That's our biggest drawback to being able to enforce, and I don't know what you guys would be able to do to fix that.
So just to maybe add to that, I kind of was wondering this. So I happen to have somebody on my block that has a car that does that. Is there any way that if I send you the license plate and description of the vehicle, where they live or whatever, and that you can go and conduct a kind of a search on that vehicle to see if it's at the standard that it's supposed to be? Is that something that's possible now, or can that be possible through you, Madam Mayor?
Yes, that is actually how we get a lot of our complaints, is that someone will be very specific. So they'll say, the 17-year-old kid that lives 2 doors down with me that drives a black car with this license plate, plays his stereo extremely loud every time he comes home. Now, I can't go knock on the door and compel them to show me what's on their vehicle. I have to have them operating on a public roadway. But we have gone and we have sat in the area and waited for the vehicle to come by, and then we pull the vehicle over and we can check it over. I can't go into somebody's driveway and say, start your vehicle and tell me what's wrong with it, or I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it, because that's not allowed, because it's not being operated on the public highway. So we do need it to be operated on the road, or someone, say on the general public side, who's willing to write a witness statement and attend court if that happens, stating what they heard, what they saw, and who they saw doing it. So
just to kind of, that's not quite what I was, like, I understand the music and stuff like that, but what I'm trying to figure out is these cars have these pipes on and these mufflers and all that kind of stuff. Are you able to find somebody for not having the proper pipe or muffler or however that works to, like, because I've heard there's the noise mufflers and stuff, and it's a specific muffler that's put on there. Are you guys allowed to ticket people that have the wrong mufflers or have the wrong pipes on through you, Madam Mayor?
Yes, sorry that I must have misunderstood your question. Under the vehicle equipment regulations, which fall under the Traffic Safety Act, we have section 18 for failing to have a muffler that effectively reduces combustion noise, which means it can't be louder than what the Canadian Motor Vehicle Standards say. It has to quiet the vehicle, not make it louder. There's also not having a muffler on your vehicle, which a lot of them have done. They have the straight pipes and they've removed the muffler itself from the vehicle. There's also the issue we're having with a lot of the new sport vehicles, such as the new Ford Mustangs and such, is that they have a sport mode and a normal mode, where all they have to do is press a button and it changes the position of the baffles inside of their muffler, which causes it to be louder. So they can hit that button, turn it on, turn it off whenever they want. And if we are driving down the road and they turn it off because they see the police car from 5 blocks away, then they turn it on once they get past this again. We can enforce that. We can, as long as we catch them, same as anything else. So in terms of not having a muffler or having straight pipes or anything like that, we have the vehicle equipment regulations. If they hit their sport mode and make their muffler louder, we have the noise bylaw or the Traffic Safety Act for using your vehicle to cause a loud and unnecessary noise. So we do have the options out there, but like I said previously, we have to catch them, or we have to have a member of the public who is willing to write a full detailed statement and be willing to attend court to testify on behalf of the ticket as to what they heard and saw.
Thank you. That helps me. It's kind of like you're fighting City Hall, because the cars are making them like that. Like if they're coming from factory like that, am I correct in understanding?
Yes, the ones with the sport mode are coming directly from the factory like that. And we know it's an issue with the Mustangs. We've now started to see it on BMWs and a few other of the sport cars out there. So we're not only fighting the people, but we're fighting the manufacturers in North America.
Right. So with your opinion, and I mean, I'm sure you've chatted along with your fellow your fellow officers, the fine really isn't what deters it. I understand, and I know for myself, it's the SGI points that deter majority of people. Am I correct in making that statement through you, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, it's the points, which is the fear of losing the license.
Right.
And it's the impoundability under the Traffic Safety Act for the fear of losing a vehicle. Because racing, for example, if we catch 2 cars racing under the Traffic Safety Act, it's an impound of your vehicle for 30 days, and it's 4 additional points on your license. Once you hit 12 points, you get the warning letters from SGI that you're going to have to start taking defensive driving courses, you could have your license suspended. So that's what people are afraid of, and that's the number one thing we hear in the courts from people is, I don't want the points because I don't want to lose my license. It's not, I don't want to pay the fine, it's I don't want the points. Or they don't want to affect their insurance rating because they have their 20% discount on their insurance, and if they lose the safe driver record points, they have to pay more on their insurance. That is what gets people more than the fines.
Okay, actually, that clarifies a lot of the questions I had, so thank you very much. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you very much for being here. Just in regards to the report, we did have a good discussion at Ops, but it was in the motion that we did bring forward about increasing the fine during night hours. And I know we just discussed that increasing the fine doesn't really impact anybody. They will continue to offend, doesn't really matter how high the fine is. But one of the biggest things I think we've heard from residents is the fact that it is during the night and it's disturbing quality of life. Like people are sleeping with earplugs and, you know, children can't sleep. They're waking up in the night, especially during COVID when we had our essential workers, our nurses that were, you know, shift work. And those are the kinds of calls that we're getting that were so upsetting to me that we could not mitigate this noise level. Now, this just isn't Regina. This is across Canada, and this is why we brought the motion forward. But I'm concerned that in the report, it just came out of a 250. I mean, we increased it to 250. I'd like to know that if it was a $500 or if it was $1,000, wouldn't that even just send a message that you know it's higher and they could be caught on that? Like, wouldn't that even just help with that messaging out there through the chair?
I'd like to say yes to that, and that was the thoughts between the Traffic Safety Act and having the higher fines and the escalating fines for driving without due care and attention, driving without reasonable consideration for others, driving with a cell phone in your hand. All of those are escalating fines, like I mentioned earlier, $580, $1,400, $2,100 that we have available to us. One of the big things we've seen with that is this year, for example, it's only May, and we've already written 145 cell phone tickets. We've written 58 due care and attention or reasonable consideration for other tickets. We've also written 367 unregistered tickets with come with a $580 fine. So the increased fines, in reality, they don't deter as much as we had hoped they would. I don't know if it's because people seem to have more money to spend or they think they're not going to get caught. But the other thing that, and I know we talked about this last week, is the thing we have to be careful about is that we don't want to outprice what the justice on the bench feels is appropriate as well. And like I had mentioned when we talked about the $150 under the noise bylaw, that was in line with a noisy party complaint or a barking dog complaint, which we also get a lot at night. And we didn't, if we raise it too much, the justice does have the authority and the power to lower the fine. So we have run into that in the past where we were writing certain fines that a justice always reduced anyway. And people would tell us that when they got pulled over, they say, well, I'll just go to court and ask for a reduced fine and I'll get it anyway. So the increased fine isn't the only, it doesn't scare people as much as it used to, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. I want to know, though, out of this report, and you had indicated that, you know, we've only got, I think it's 6 officers, 12 officers in total, 6 on a shift. Doesn't sound for me to me that, I mean, we've already used up our budget to try and hone in on some of the individuals for speeding, stunting, and racing, and we're not even into June yet, and we know that they get revved up June, July, and August. It doesn't end. So what's the mitigation strategy here? Like, what is this goes forward? What are we really? I mean, we waited for over a year on this report. What are we going to get back for how we're going to really mitigate the excessive noise? Like, how can we do it?
You know, we had a couple things in plan last year, but unfortunately the pandemic changed that. We had consulted with SGI Vehicle Standards and Inspection Group, and we were, as a traffic safety unit, we were going to try to set up some dates with some of these car enthusiast groups like Beasted Society and some of the other ones, that all of these cars kind of travel around together, which are a lot of our offenders. And we were going to have such things as information sessions, you know, come to this parking lot with your car, we'll tell you what falls under law, what doesn't fall under law. We'll get it straight from the experts with SGI who write the laws and the regulations. Unfortunately, we've been put on hold for almost a year for that because of the pandemic. So that is something that we as a traffic safety unit with the Regina Police Service are going to try to do. Once we have the ability to do that and we can have a large amount of people gathering in a parking lot and stuff like that. In terms of what we can do in terms of enforcement, I'll be honest with you, we're doing the best we can. It gets harder for us in the summer because, like everybody else, we have families and kids and we take holidays in the summer. So having 6 members on each shift and having 12 in the traffic safety unit working through June, July, August doesn't happen. And it won't happen again this year because we take our holidays in the summer as well. So we prioritize the complaints that come in, the areas, the safety risks behind it, and we try to enforce in those areas the best we can. That's all I can honestly answer for that, is that's the best we can do, and we do the best we can.
Okay. For the noise measurement, it's indicated in the report that it'd be way too costly. Edmonton uses an actual gun. They don't actually have to take it to a storage facility. They can actually use a gun. Are you aware of that type of equipment?
There is a gun out there that yes, it's a decibel reader that they can use, but I know in talking with Edmonton Police, to be able to narrow it down to the specific vehicle or to determine how much of it's from that vehicle and how much of it is residual noise from the other vehicles around is extremely complicated, and they actually haven't laid a lot of charges under their laws for using that. It's more of a tool to say, hey, we think your vehicle might be too loud. We should probably do something about that. But to use it for enforcement, they haven't had much success with doing that.
Through the chair, how many tickets have we given out for mufflers or for loud noises for vehicles?
How long would you like to go back?
Oh, just like in the last year.
In the last year? Just give me 1 second to bring it up.
Sure.
Here.
Sorry, at committee there was one ticket given, and I thought that was.
Yeah. For 2021, there's only been 1 ticket issued for an inadequate muffler. No tickets under Section 4 of the noise bylaw, and 1 ticket under Section 215 of the Traffic Safety Act, which is create a loud and unnecessary noise with their vehicle. In 2020, we issued 13 inadequate muffler tickets and 5 tickets under Section 215 of the Traffic Safety Act. A lot of the times what we've done is we will issue what's called an inspection ticket, which isn't a fine, a monetary fine, but it compels the owner of the vehicle to have the vehicle fixed to Canadian Motor Vehicle Standards and Vehicle Equipment Regulation Standards. And if they don't, that vehicle will no longer be allowed to be registered by SGI if they don't comply. So there's no monetary fine to go with it, but we do write a lot of inspection tickets, which don't come into our stats, unfortunately, because it's not a monetary fine under the Traffic Safety Act or the bylaw. So
through the chair, why could we not write a ticket if we know that it's doesn't have a muffler, or why would it? Because don't they sometimes then just take it there, get it done, and then just put it on again? Like, isn't that kind of a repetitive?
It's been known to happen, absolutely. Our hope is compliance. In all reality, every traffic member doesn't want to write tickets every single day to people. They don't. I've worked in the traffic safety unit or part of the traffic safety unit since 2010. I've been called more names in the traffic safety unit by our upstanding members of society because I pulled them over for a ticket than I spent 6 years working in another more dangerous area of the city where I've arrested people for first-degree murder, and they said, okay, you got me. It wears on an officer after time, and officers have the discretion to decide, because it is in our powers, do we want to write a ticket with a fine? Do we want to write an inspection ticket? Do we want to give a warning? We have that authority to do so, and it's up to the officer to decide what they want to do. If we take that discretion away from the officers, it'll change how we do our jobs.
Okay. I think the point is that residents have really raised the bar here for stunting and racing, and it's safety is number one, but then also quality of life with the loud mufflers. And, you can't put a price, I think, again, on when we're talking about public safety, but we're also talking about the quality of life that just happens at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And the mufflers that I'm talking about are the ones that can sound like gunshots. Like, that's what puts the vibration and the community that just sets them so, we don't live in a large city. So it just seems that there's a group that continues, and they have a circuit. And it's frustrating when we, just seem like we just can't combat that circuit I'm on right out here on the east, Chuka and Arcola and you name it. Then they head down to the RMF field in Douglas Park. Then they head around, go and do the circuit around the Ledge building and go into our beautiful parks. And they head out, like it's a circuit. They go all around the whole circle of the city. And if we can't, can we use ghost cars? Can we, I don't know, but I know that it is frustrating from a resident's point of view. And I guess the last piece that I think is, and this might be administration, but in the report, it was not identified, as we heard from the first delegation, that any we have some, and as we heard, Chuka Boulevard is one, many mitigation strategy for traffic calming. And I know that Saskatoon just, I think in 2018, they did a speed hump pilot. And I know that we as a city have always said, we don't want to use any speed bumps because they're not good in the winter. Other municipalities have used temporary speed bumps. But I didn't see anything in the report, and I'd like administration to report on that coming back here as to what are the solutions and what are some of the areas that were targeted, and what is going to be the mitigation strategy here for traffic calming, if there is any.
In terms of traffic calming, I'll leave that to the traffic engineers, because I do believe there was a couple paragraphs in the report about the concerns around humps and what the new strategies are used. So I will pass that off to someone much more qualified than I on that subject.
Thank you. Administration then, I guess.
Thank you. Mr. Onright.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So we have done a couple of pilots and tried some new strategies. I'll ask Mr. Warren to further comment on the progress of that and what our strategy is moving forward.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. So the city has performed some traffic calming measures in the last number of years. Traffic calming measures are intended for local and collector roads that have chronic history of speeding and stunting. Arterial and major roads are not typically employed traffic calming measures on those. Just again, the idea is to move the majority of traffic. And when we talk about speed humps, those have been removed from kind of some of the options that we entertain, not only due to, as Councillor Bresciani mentioned, issues during the winter clearing, but also emergency vehicles, and the reason that they have to slow down for those. But also some of the statistics are that in between speed humps, residents are actually speeding to make up for lost ground. So as part of our larger program, we have installed some traffic calming curbs, temporary traffic calming curbs, for example, up on Wayland Drive in 2020. We've also done some of that more permanent work, for example, on Dudney Avenue East in front of the school. So these are a couple of things that we've done in the past and will continue to do so. It slows traffic down. It also narrows the road width and allows for shorter crossing distances for pedestrians as well. We've also employed speed feedback signs. So where we install the speed feedback, so it notifies residents of their speed. And as part of our current program, we are looking to have a rotation where we install those speed feedback signs at various locations where we have information that suggests that speeding is prevalent. And again, just trying to spread that through the community where the issues have been addressed. So those are a couple of the things that we've been doing. And we are also looking to put forward a business case in 2022 to enhance that, to enhance our traffic calming measures, as well as how they affect, as well as amenities for pedestrians. So that is something that we're working on and would want to bring forward in 2022.
Okay. I guess the last question, or it's not even a question, I'm going to ask that administration do an undertaking. And I would like to, and this comes from the recommendation from the first delegation, that to identify the locations that require increased targeting of enforcement or traffic calming solutions, and with suggestions of how that would come back. So Amber, my amendment that I sent, it would just be number 4. So you can take out 1, 2, and 3 now that we've discussed this, but number 4. So it would just be, and I don't know if it's an amendment or just an undertaking, if I can just ask administration, would they be able to bring back a report with Regina Police Service to find out what, identify the specific locations and the targeted enforcement that's going to happen, as well as the calming solutions that can be. Is that an undertaking or is that an amendment?
Thanks, Councillor Bresciani. I think I'll ask administration to determine if they already have the information. I think it's an undertaking. If not, I think it's an amendment. Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So just to clarify what is currently done, there is a bylaw, an internal traffic bylaw working group. Of the makeup of that is our traffic engineers, and also Regina Police Service sits on that committee. So some of this is already discussed in the committee. I'll ask Mr. Warren whether or not we have enough information on that today that we could take it as an undertaking. I would suggest if we don't, that it become an amendment to what's on the floor now.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Masters. So administration does currently, as Mr. Onright mentioned, review locations that are considered a problem or an issue. And as I mentioned before, we are employing some of these traffic calming tactics or measures to help curb some of the speed that is taking place. So whether we're introducing temporary traffic calming curbs, or whether we're installing temporary speed feedback signs, or installing permanent traffic calming curbs. These are locations that are being prioritized, and the investment is put towards those locations. So we do have some of that information available, and it always dependent on the available budget as well.
Mr. Onright?
So I'm still not.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Bresciani. I'm actually still a bit at sea. Is this an amendment then? You have enough information to include it, say, in point number 5 on the recommendations, or do you require amendment to make it its own point? Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I would suggest we just leave it as an undertaking. We do have some of the information now, so I've confirmed we can take it as an undertaking.
Councillor Bresciani, is that satisfactory?
Sure, and when would that come back to the chair?
Mr. Onright, would you bring it back in terms of the timelines of the existing timelines within the report?
Through you, Mayor Masters, Q2 of 2022.
Sure. I would be fine. The only thing, the problem I would worry about is we just talked about funding. And I would like to see this if there is funding, because I know with Regina Police Service that there was a fund that they were able to, and I apologize, I forget the fund, that they were able to task and have some of their officers work on these special tasks to connect or catch some of these speeders. They wouldn't have been able to do that without that funding. So if it comes after the budget discussions, that won't work. So would there be a possibility to bring this back before budget?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So I believe, Councillor Bresciani, you were referring to the money that is split with SGI on speed cameras. So that is
that's right, speed cameras.
That is an internal, that doesn't go through our budget process. There's an internal working group that will review that with RPS and determine how much money can be allocated towards that. I've just confirmed we can bring a report in Q4, and as Mr. Warren has indicated, there will be a business case coming forward through our traffic branch and doing additional calming tactics in 2022. That will be a part of the 2022 budget process.
Okay, but just as I indicated, the undertaking would come back then in Q4, but then but the calming tactics would then across the whole would come in Q2 of 2022, is that right? Or Q4?
Q4 is what I am referring to in terms of bringing something back. That would replace the Q2 2022 report.
That would be great. That's all I have. And thank you very much. And I want to say also thank you to Regina Police Service for the work that they've done on as best as they can with what they have in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Stevens.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the only real solution to this is a quicker transition to electric vehicles away from fossil fuels. Sound problem goes away with it. I have a question for you, Officer Kravitz, and I apologize if this puts you on the spot. Since there's an advocacy component in our report, can you comment on the effectiveness of the Government of Ontario's response where fines for racing and stunting start at $2,000, ours end at $2,000, and go up to $10,000 in addition to a series of other penalties? So it's a harsher and more expensive response to this particular issue. Can you comment on whether or not that approach is more or less effective than what we currently see in Saskatchewan?
I honestly couldn't tell you what the results of Ontario are. I don't follow Ontario and what they do, so I don't have anything to base an opinion on for that. So I don't know how it works for them.
Okay, fair enough. Again, I was going to ask some questions about traffic calming, but Councillor Bresciani has solidified a timeline, so I'm in support of that. Honestly, I think in the inner city of Regina, that's the best approach, is actual infrastructure that calms and slows traffic. So I do appreciate the work that's gone into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Through you, Mayor Masters, a couple more questions for Constable Kravitz. I wonder if you could tell me, in terms of the demographics of who's mostly responsible for this. You mentioned that there's Mustangs, sports cars, but I'm also wondering, so who is it that's driving them? Is it mostly a younger demographic? And what about in terms of the noise between sports cars or cars with bad mufflers versus motorcycles? Through the chair.
In terms of who is doing it, it depends on what specifically you're looking for. If you're looking for vehicle equipment regulations where there might be an inadequate muffler, that could be anybody that owns a vehicle that can't afford to fix it. So it's anybody in society, it's anybody in the public that owns a vehicle. In terms of some of these fancier Mustangs or BMWs, obviously it's people that can afford to buy a BMW or a Mustang. And it's also, I'm not going to say it's the younger crowd, but it could be anywhere from 16, 17 years old to up into the 40s. Yes, I haven't caught a lot of 70 or 80-year-old men out there, but there are some, because there are some that have sunk their life into some of these things. I recently did something with a gentleman, he's 70, retired veteran, who had a 56 Chev Bel Air that he sunk over $100,000 into. He was doing the same thing that the 16, 17-year-old kids were doing. So it's everybody out there, and it's everywhere in the city.
Okay, thank you for that. Sometimes I was asking that question because sometimes maybe a solution can be directed to those that are more responsible. What about motorcyclists? It seems in terms of the overview of other jurisdictions that there seems to be more specific. I'm opening it up again. More specific fines for motorcycles in other jurisdictions. And in Saskatoon, I see it increases by the number of offenses that you have. So in terms of the complaints that are made, is there a significant proportion that would be motorcycles?
We used to have a significant proportion that were motorcycles. The last few years, not nearly as much in regards to the motorcycles. The biggest thing that was with the motorcycle crowd was the whole loud pipes save lives is what a lot of the motorcycle groups did, or straight pipes save lives, loud pipes straight lives, which is what they used as a way of saying, well, this is how we're visible on the roadway, is we make our bikes louder, and the guy in the car that doesn't see us at least hears us. The problem with that, and the part of that didn't work, is that the pipes on the motorcycle point backwards, not forward. So the sound is traveling backwards, not forward to the car that's in front of you that changes lanes in front of you and picks you off on the motorcycle. So it wasn't an effective solution, and we treated it the same as we did with anybody else. Motorcycles still fall under the vehicle equipment regulations with what they have to comply with, and they still fall under Section 215 of the Traffic Safety Act for creating a loud and unnecessary noise. So we deal with them in the exact same way that we do with cars.
Okay, thank you for that. Through you, Madam Mayor, another question for the Constable. You mentioned that there were plans to hold kind of an educational session with car enthusiasts. I did have a conversation with someone who's a car enthusiast who said they used to gather to kind of do speed skill testing things with cones set up in a parking lot, and that they've had difficulty finding a place to do it, that there is some kind of a racing track somewhere outside of the city that they're not allowed to go to. So is there any of these groups of offenders that would have some other place where they could do what they want to do without having to disturb residents on the streets of Regina?
The scary thing with that is if we say yes, I'm assuming that you're going to be talking about Kings Park Speedway just off of Highway 46 outside of Regina, which is the racetrack out there.
Yeah.
The scary thing with us telling people, okay, yes, go out to Kings Park Speedway and have a test of speed. What happens if they roll their vehicle and end up killing themselves? Are we liable for that because we told them it was okay to go do that? And then we're facing lawsuits from the family and stuff like that. We have to be very careful. There's rules and regulations in place for a reason. They're there for the safety of people. I understand, yes, we'd love to be able to enforce more. Yes, we'd love to be able to educate more. We do the best we can. But we have to be very careful about saying, yeah, we're going to open up Kings Park Speedway to you, for example. Go out there, set your cones up, do your stuff. because there could be some serious repercussions that come out of that as well, and we might not get the intended effect that we want. So there is nothing for that in the city of Regina. I know that is one of the big things they used to do up in Saskatoon at SIR, at the Saskatchewan International Raceway, which is the drag strip just outside of the city, is they used to come and have the drag races on the drag strip, but it was regulated, it was safety, you had to meet certain standards for safety, but it didn't deter a lot in the city as much as they had hoped to, because people had to conform with the regulations and the rules, and they didn't want to, so they could still continue to race in the city. So doing that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to solve anything. It just might solve it for a handful of the people.
Okay, thank you for that. Through you, Mayor Masters, I guess it's a question for administration now. We've dealt with a lot of information, and I really appreciate the tables, but I am wondering, since we're talking about undertakings before, what would be very helpful for me to understand the various laws and bylaws that affect this issue, if it would be at all possible to have a table that outlines the different kinds of laws and what the if there are fines associated with it, who's responsible for enforcing that, just because it's been hard for me to understand all of the different both the traffic laws and the bylaws that we have at the City of Regina. Is that something that could be done?
Through you, Mayor Masters, yes, we can pull the information together and we'll bring it forward in Q4 with the other information for council.
Okay, thank you. That's really wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnicek. Councillor Mancinelli.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, we were talking this conversation today like everything has to do with the spirit of racing. Are a lot of these incidents a byproduct of road rage and problems like that? Through the chair.
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll ask Constable Crowitz to comment.
Yes, sorry, I wasn't sure who the question was for, so I didn't want to answer right away. It's a little bit of everything. Some is road rage, some is impatience, some is just they want to show off their fancy vehicle that they have. So we can't narrow it down to one thing, it's a little bit of everything.
Thank you for that. Through the chair, I noticed that we have a lot of mitigation factors in place already. The one that come up to limit them all is the amount of officers per shift and staffing. With the recent budget, we approved extra positions. Are some of these positions going towards fixing this problem, or is that being brought up in future budgets? And if so, I'd just like at this time to advocate for future positions being used to fill this problem. Through the chair.
Well, that'd be up to the chief of police and the deputy chief, not me in my role. So I don't know what their plans are for that. I can't answer that one. That might be something with the Board of Police Commissioners and the chief to handle.
Okay. One last question through the chair. I noticed when we have problems in the city, especially with legal matters, one of the first steps of recourse is engagement with the offensive group, trying to better understand and mentor. I noted that you had plans that were stalled by the pandemic, but with the last reply you gave, it sounds like that's not really a chosen path that's going forward. Could I just get some clarification on that?
No, absolutely, that is a chosen path that we'd love to be able to do. We just don't know when we're going to be able to do it again. So we can't count on it happening right away because we don't know what the restrictions and the rules are going to be on us. We also have to make sure that SGI is available and the vehicle standards and inspection members are available to come out when we do these projects. Education is a big part of our job. It's not just enforcement, which is what most people see us as. Our two main roles are education and enforcement, and we'd love to educate in compliance. As I said earlier, I'd love to not have to write a ticket for something because everyone complies with it, because that means the roads are safer. Because the other thing I do, and the other thing I've done for years, is I am the main collision investigator for the city, and I oversee the collision program. So I unfortunately oversee all the carnage when the rules aren't followed. So I'd love to be able to educate people more. I've gone into schools, I've gone into other committees and done presentations with the education part. So hopefully we can work on the education stuff, but our main source right now is the enforcement. So we're not shying away from the education part. We just need to wait until we can get through the pandemic to do it.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Just a question. You identified checking out the vehicles and the main inspector. When you're identifying problems with vehicles, you often call for them to have a interprovincial inspection. How often is the state of vehicles a problem with the accidents happening? Does it come into play big time in our city?
No, very, very seldom actually is the mechanical condition of the vehicle a factor in the collision, and I can say that 100% for the last 12 years that I've overseen the program and been involved. 99.9% of the collisions are caused by driver error and driver action.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's all I have. Well, actually, I do have one more question. There was an option on the table in Appendix B for administration to be part of the engagement. Knowing that it comes together with planning with RPS and SGI, do you think city administration does have a place if you get this engagement going once the pandemic alleviates?
Absolutely. Because city administration is the one that gets all the complaints about the noise. So why wouldn't they want to be part of this, and why wouldn't we want to have them as part of this? I think it would be great to have ourselves, SGI, and some of you as councillors out there who maybe hear this more than anybody from their constituents in their wards, to be out there and also see what we're doing and what we're educating, so you can be part of it as well, to provide those answers to people in the future. Absolutely, you should be part of it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. With that answer, I'd like to move for option 3 for Appendix A to be part of the main motion.
You're moving an amendment.
Yes. For option 3, it was not recommended from Appendix A from the report.
Okay, let's just give Amber 1 moment to catch up. Does Councillor Mancinelli have a seconder?
Bresciani will second that.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Mancinelli, while we're adding that to the recommendations, did you want to speak further to this?
I sure do. I think this goes beyond just the speeding and exhaust problems. I see a real problem with manners on our roads in general. I was identifying with the indication to road rage through representative. I think like anything else, if you're trying to solve a problem, the first step is engagement and education, and I think this is what this speaks to, and that's why I'm moving it as an amendment.
See you, Coley.
Thanks, Councillor Mancinelli. Could I have administration speak to why it was not recommended?
Through you, Mayor Masters, administration sees this, or when we reviewed this, as SGI leading this, because it should be a provincial program and discussion. However, I'm just wondering if the intent of Councillor Mancinelli's amendment is for administration to be a part of the discussion and not be the lead in the education and communication program. Part of that, through the old shared revenue with SGI through the old contract, the city received more money. Now the city receives, I think it's around 10% in that campaign. So we see this as more of SGI leading the education piece with RPS definitely at the table. And if the intent of Councillor Mancinelli's amendment is to have administration at the table and not paying for the education portion, then we definitely would be in agreement. If the intent is for the city to increase the education program, then there would be required budget to go with that.
I would be satisfied with us being at the table and active at that table. I think we spent the last couple, or at least the last hour, giving feedback from our residents on what a problem this is in our city and some of the problems we see in our city. So for the residents to know that we're at the table working on the problem in cooperation, I think should be more than enough and in the right direction.
Okay, so you got to reword. Through Mayor Masters, that would be fine. I would just ask that the amendment be reworded.
I'll just refer back to the option in the report and see what I can do. It says establish awareness and education campaigns regarding. Maybe we can just change that wording to participate in awareness and education campaigns. Would that be enough of a change to capture what you're speaking of?
Through you, Mayor Masters, that would be fine.
Perfect.
Amber's changing it now. Councillor Mancinelli.
Sorry about off the floor, but I had to see where the conversation went first.
Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment? All right.
Actually, I do have a question.
Certainly, Councillor Stadnicek.
So I'm just trying to get a good sense of what so the city could recommend or have their own take on some kind of an educational program. So I'm just assuming that we'd want to have emphasis on how, the danger of speeding and stunting, but also how it disturbs your fellow citizens in the city. I agree with that, but I want to know, like, if there would be a different take that the city would have over what SGI would do, because SGI already talks about, what's within their jurisdiction, but it would be the city's education would be more on the impact on citizens. Through the mayor, a question to the administration.
Through you, Mayor Masters, definitely, I think we see, as Mr. Krowitz had indicated through our Service Regina program, we see most of the noise complaints that come through, so we definitely can take that for discussion with that group.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnicek. Seeing no one else, Mr. Clerk, could you call the vote on the amendment? Okay, actually, I apologize. Councillor Mancinelli, did you wish to add anything else in closing?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll begin with Councillor Mancinelli, please.
In favor.
Councillor Moll.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Opposed.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnicek.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Amendment carries 10-1, Mayor.
That's all I had to say in general as well.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion as main motion as amended who hasn't spoken yet? Seeing no one, I'll ask the city clerk to call the vote. Again, I apologize. Councillor Hawkins, did you wish to close off debate?
No, I have nothing further to say, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please proceed, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. I'll begin with Councillor Hawkins, please.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnicek.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
Favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Moore.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Carries 11-0, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will now move on to bylaws and related reports. We will consider item CR 21-92, the joint use agreement partnership with public and Catholic school boards. Councillor Hawkins, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you very much.
Sorry, point of order, sorry. Mayor Masters, I will declare a conflict as my husband is a trustee on the Catholic school.
I apologize. Thank you very much for speaking up. Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Bresciani will leave the meeting. Apologies, Councillor Hawkins. Please proceed.
No problem at all. This is an important agreement, a partnership between the city and the two school boards. It's an agreement basically in which city and related groups like community associations can use school facilities, and school students can use city facilities at times that are appropriate for everything but stunt raising. I wonder if I could ask the administration just to say where we are negotiating a new agreement.
Ms. Harlip?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, so the staff have negotiated this agreement, and both school boards are supportive of it. If you'd like, I can give the highlights of the agreement, but at this point, we both school boards and ourselves feel that this agreement provides the right amount of access for the community. It provides some more. It provides the school some certainty around their access to our facilities, and it's a more modern agreement than what we had in the past. It'll set up a governance committee that will help us to work through issues that may arise through the tenure of the agreement.
Thank you very much. This is good news, and I'd ask council to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Can I get a seconder for this?
Second, Mayor.
Councillor Shaw.
Okay, everyone. Councillor Skiniak will give you this one. Any questions or comments from members on the report? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, sorry, I put my name in there.
There, it just showed up, Councillor Skiniak. Apologies. Go ahead, please.
Okay. That's okay, thanks. I just wanted to say that I've heard I heard about the concerns related to us not having needing to work on the joint use agreement during the campaign and since the campaign, and I'm really appreciative of these revisions, and it is my understanding that my predecessor, Councillor Mike O'Donnell, did a lot of good work to make this happen, so I'm very thankful for that, and I'm happy to support this, the revised work on the joint use agreement, and thank everyone involved in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zakiniak. Councillor Findura.
Thank you, Madam Master. Sorry. I just want to say this was long time coming. I was part of some of these discussions, and the community always been asking about the uses of the schools and all that. So this keeps the kids off the street, gives them, especially wintertime, place to play ball or get involved and get some constructive educational pieces for. So this is an outstanding piece. This is long coming. This is going to be good for the community on both sides. So I'm all in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Findura. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, Councillor Hawkins, did you want to close?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, I'll ask that you please call the vote.
Thank you. I'll begin with Councillor Hawkins, please.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Mole.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Carries 10-0, Mayor.
Council, we're just going to pause one moment while we have Councillor Bresciani rejoin the meeting. Thank you. Welcome back, Councillor Bresciani. We will now consider bylaw numbers 2021-41 and 2021-42, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Stevens to do the first reading for the bylaws.
Great, thank you. So the first bylaw is 21-41, the properties exempt from taxation as a result of the 2013 municipal boundary alteration bylaw. Number 42 is the committee amendment bylaw number 2. I move, seconded by Councillor Stadnichuk, the bylaws 2021-41 and 42 be introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Any opposed? Carried. Second reading?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move, seconded by Councillor Bresciani, that Council hereby consents to 2021-41 and 42 going to be read a second time.
Thank you. Do any members of Council have any questions? Hearing none. Any opposed? Carried. Third reading, please.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that Council hereby consents to 2021-41 and 42 going to a third reading at this meeting.
Any opposed? Carried. You can do the final reading now if you like.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaws 2021-41 and 42 be read a third time.
Any opposed? Carried. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'm going to adjourn.
I'm going to let Deputy Clerk Ackerman determine who said that, and seconded by Councillor Findura. Thank you very much. Any opposed? Passed. Well done, Council. We'll talk soon, and have a wonderful evening and great weekend.